I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to welcome everyone to the April 18th, 2018 meeting of the New Hampshire Fish and Game Commission. The public is entitled to attend all commission meetings, and when recognized by the chairman, the public may speak on any item on the agenda. The chairman reserves the right to limit public comments to the extent necessary for the orderly conduct of the meeting. First item, approval of the March 14, 2018 commission minutes. Has everybody had a chance to look over the minutes? Anything need changing?
I had one detail, which was the rescheduling of the Wildlife Heritage Foundation. It was actually March 21st, not February 21st.
So noted. Any other changes? Anyone want to make a motion to accept the minutes?
So moved.
Made by Commissioner Pack, seconded by Commissioner Hodgdon. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
I abstain. I wasn't here.
Okay, one abstention. So moved. Next item, presentation of the 2017 Commission Awards of Excellence. You guys ready?
Yep.
Okay. This year marks the 13th year of the New Hampshire Fish and Game Commission's annual Awards of Excellence. The Awards Committee was very pleased to have so many nominations this year. On behalf of the Commission and the Department, we would like to thank everyone who took the time and made the effort to nominate the many deserving people. After much consideration and deliberation, it is our pleasure to present the following 2017 Commission Awards of Excellence. The first two awards will be presented by Commissioner Baldwin. When your name is announced, please come forward. Commissioner Baldwin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. First, we'd like to present a volunteer award of excellence to Janice Boynton. Hi, lady.
Hi.
Janice has been involved with the New Hampshire Becoming Outdoors Woman program since 1990s. Over the years, she has been a consistent and dedicated supporter, quietly working behind the scenes. Janice has been a volunteer committee member, has served on the merchandise committee, has handled the finances for BOW, Barry Camp, and BOW scholarship funds. Her excellent communications and organizational skills have made her a real asset and a joy to work with. She is a team player and is always friendly, compassionate, and respectful of others. Janice has a passion for wildlife and outdoor sports. She is an avid angler and gardener, enjoys foraging for wild mushrooms. However, it has been said that she's happiest when she's volunteering and sharing her passions with others. Being a volunteer herself is admirable, but one thing that is unique about Janice is her amazing ability to gather others and encourage them to work for a common cause. Janice has always been very enthusiastic about the BOW program and committed to its success. She has been willing to step up and take on roles and help out when nobody else would. We thank her for her work she has done and continues to do in the sport of the interests of sportswomen of New Hampshire. I have known Janice personally for a long time and seen her capabilities firsthand. She's quite a lady. I feel also that New Hampshire Wildlife Federation can be ever thankful that Janice held the fort so many times to get them through so many storms. To Janice, the well-deserved Volunteer Award of Excellence. My pleasure, Janice. Old leg.
Thank you.
Good girl. Would you like to speak, or?
No.
You may. You may if you wish, but you don't have to.
Well, I'd just like to thank everyone who supported me for this award. It was a surprise the day I opened the envelope, and I thank you all, and I truly enjoy what I'm doing, and I truly am dedicated to the sportsmen and women of the state of New Hampshire. Thank you.
Conservation Award of Excellence, I would like to call forward for the University of New Hampshire Cooperative Extension, Larry Barker. We would like to take this opportunity to recognize and thank the University of New Hampshire Co-op Extension for their role in operating Barry Conservation Camp. Since 1984, New Hampshire Fish and Game and New Hampshire Cooperative Extension have partnered together for the joint purpose of conducting a conservation camp for kids. The camp is located on the grounds of Berlin State Fish Hatchery and the U.S. Forest Service lands. It consists of 6 rustic cabins, a multi-purpose building with gathering space, a dining hall, restrooms, facilities, and fishing, swimming, hiking, and shooting access, all within close proximity. This is a great partnership because it meets the mission of both the 4-H program and the Fish and Game through developing life and leadership skills in youth while educating them about wildlife and natural resources and providing them opportunities to use and appreciate these resources. UNH has taken on the primary role of administering the camp, from hiring counselors to juggling the logistics of camper registrations and everything else that is needed to run a conservation camp. Over the years, thousands of kids have benefited from Barry Conservation Camp, but without the partnership with UNH in this conservation effort, we would not have had the success in reaching so many youth and teaching them about conservation, nor would we be able to continue to do so for future generations. I have known, I almost went back to our dear Janice, but I would like to add that the New Hampshire Co-op Extension goes far beyond just Barry Conservation Camp. It offers many opportunities for the public to share in their research, studies, and reports and services. I have also shared many good memories sharing UNH as a parent of a graduated student. It is indeed my honor to be the one to award Conservation Organization Award of Excellence. And you, sir, congratulations.
Thank you.
Keep up the good work.
Sure, I'll talk. And I'm glad to hear your speech, because you talked about everything I wanted to talk about except for one thing, so I could turn my attention to that. It really, Barry Conservation Camp, I addressed the commissioners last year at this time, and it really is a magic place. And the partnership between UNH Cooperative Extension and Fish and Game has been, as you said, for over 30 years, has been a wonderful relationship, and it's really a win-win. And when I talked last year to the commission, I talked a lot about what we did at camp, and you heard some of that in the comments that were just read. But the other thing that we do at Barry Camp is that we really put a real emphasis on not only introducing kids to the outdoors, getting them unplugged, getting them dirty, introducing them to shooting sports and fishing and hunting and those kind of things, but we also try to create a positive youth development environment. And we pay a lot of attention to the culture and climate at camp. And if you've followed Barry Camp, or if you tried to get your kids into Barry Camp, you'll know that over the last 12 or 15 years, 10 or 12 years, we've been on a real steep trajectory. It just seems like it's getting more and more popular. And I lay a big, one of the big reasons that happens is because of the climate and culture at camp. And I'm really pleased today. I wanted to bring the attention to someone that came and joined us, and I'm so happy that he's here. We've enjoyed Jaime Welsh as our camp director for the last 12 years or thereabouts. And he is, in my mind, almost single-handedly responsible for this increased trajectory and everything that happens at camp. And although he's retired officially as director for this summer, I wanted to recognize him because he is the reason Barry Camp is what it is today. So thank you, Jaime, very much.
Good afternoon. May I please have the representative for Bearpaw Regional Greenways? I would have called your name, but someone was slacking.
It's Daniel Kern.
Bearpaw Regional Greenways is a nonprofit land trust that works to permanently conserve land throughout southeastern New Hampshire to protect the region's water, wildlife habitat, forest, and farmland. Bearpaw has successfully worked with the department, local communities, and local landowners to protect 8,000 acres across 11 towns. These lands expand and enhance conserved habitats around Bear Brook State Park and Pawtucket State Park and contribute to connections between them. Of special significance, Bearpaw has worked diligently with New Hampshire Fish and Game and local municipalities to conserve over 2,000 acres in Hooksett and Allenstown. Bearpaw's involvement in protecting these lands was critical in negotiating with landowners and in raising the funds necessary to complete the project. All of the land protected in these towns was identified in the New Hampshire Wildlife Action Plan as the highest ranked wildlife habitat statewide. These lands provide habitat for a wide range of wildlife, including threatened and endangered species such as blandings and spotted turtles. The partnership between Bearpaw Regional Greenways and the New Hampshire Fish and Game Department is a key example of the type of partnerships needed for successful conservation of our natural resources. Because of their efforts, these lands are open to the public for outdoor recreation to include hunting, fishing, wildlife viewing, and will be for all future generations to come. It is my pleasure to present the Bearpaw Regional Greenways the Habitat Steward Award for 2017.
I just wanted to thank Mike Marchand and Rich Cook from New Hampshire Fish and Game. Working with them has been a pleasure, and we couldn't have done any of the work that we did in the towns of Hooksett and Allenstown without them. And I did want to just also mention that the town of Hooksett, Steve Kuchar as the Conservation Commission Chair, have also been instrumental to our work there. And our member towns and the members of Bearpaw that allow us to even exist are just as important. But we want to thank the recognition. We really appreciate it, and we're looking forward to the next 8,000 acres that we get to conserve.
Hi, Jeff. It is a privilege to present Mr. Jeff Trainer of Dunbarton with the Commission's Communications Award of Excellence. Come on up, Jeff. Jeff is somewhat of a newcomer to the communication scene. However, his efforts have not gone unnoticed. Since 2014, Jeff has led an effort to advocate for regulated trapping and science-based wildlife management. He has created an outstanding website and maintains a blog where he writes well-researched articles, and he effectively uses social media to create awareness and to educate people on the importance of trapping. Jeff spends countless hours researching topics, deciphering scientific articles and data, and then writing and publishing that information in a way we all can understand. His efforts would lead many to believe his writing and his outreach are his full-time job, but they aren't. Jeff works full-time, runs a trap line, operates a nuisance wildlife control business, and he's raising a young family at home. So he does all this on top of his tireless pursuit of communicating to the world about wildlife conservation. In addition, he works in collaboration with other conservation organizations, and on any given day, you may find him volunteering for the New Hampshire Trappers Association, speaking on a New Hampshire public radio, or being quoted by a national organization such as the Sportsmen's Alliance. Jeff is a true conservationist at heart with a gifted talent for writing and communicating. We thank Jeff for his efforts, and we're looking for more good work to come. So here you go, buddy. Good job.
I'd like to, I'll make it short and sweet. I'd just like to thank the department and the New Hampshire Trappers Association for their advocacy. New Hampshire trappers and hunters are often overlooked for their important contributions to wildlife conservation. And that's something that I will never stop advocating for. Thank you.
Our final award means a great deal to all of us. It is not given lightly. Former Commissioner Ellis Hatch was the first recipient of this award, and it now bears his name. Ellis Hatch is an extraordinary man of vision who made great contributions to the Fish and Game mission. So it is a fitting tribute that this honor goes to someone who has made exceptional contributions in all aspects of the New Hampshire Fish and Game Department's mission to conserve, manage, and protect natural resources, to inform and educate the public about these resources, and to provide opportunities for the public to use and appreciate these resources. It is with great pleasure that we recognize Mr. Dan Dockham of Gilmanton today as the 2017 recipient of the Ellis R. Hatch Jr. Commission Award of Excellence. Dan.
lot to say, but I wouldn't.
You ain't ready yet.
Oh. Let's get this over with.
Yeah, almost got me out of it. Dan is an avid New Hampshire sportsman and has been an advocate for sportsmen's rights for over 5 decades. As a sportsman, Dan has been committed to preserving the heritage of hunting and trapping. He has also been an advocate for science-based management of the state's wildlife and natural resources. Dan has always been a strong supporter of the department and its continued mission. He has been a long-time and very active member of various sportsmen's groups in New Hampshire and has served as a liaison to the Fish and Game Department. He has served as a voice for sportsmen both in New Hampshire and beyond. He has attended and testified at countless legislative hearings and department rulemaking hearings, providing support for science-based management decisions. He has served as a watchdog on legislation that would have adverse impacts on hunters and trappers' rights and resource management. In a modern world where hunting and the consumptive use of natural resources is often not supported by the public at large, folks like Dan remind us that the tradition of hunting was built on strong conservation ethics and resource appreciation rather than excessiveness and greed. Over the years, Dan has always been among the first to step up and lend a helping hand when needed. He has spent countless hours volunteering on department projects and research initiatives. In the 1980s, he assisted with capturing bears for tagging. This work was instrumental in developing our early knowledge of the vulnerability of bears as it relates to hunter harvest. More recently, Dan volunteered on the bobcat research project and assisted biologists in live capturing bobcats that were fitted with radio telemetry and GPS units as part of a collaborative study between the department and the University of New Hampshire. Dan has been a valuable asset to the department, to the many groups and associations in which he holds membership, and to all those who participate in hunting and trapping. He is selfless with his time and efforts and is unwavering in his beliefs. The ability to maintain this level of commitment for so many years is remarkable, particularly while balancing the dealings of raising a family, running a farm, and having a career. Dan truly exemplifies the definition of a sportsman and is one who puts the state's wildlife and natural resources above all else. We are proud to present Dan with the 2017 Ellis R. Hatch Jr. Commission Award of Excellence. Thank you, Dan, for your many years of hard work and dedication to wildlife and conservation. Okay, Dan, now you can go.
I'm more comfortable in the woods, but anyhow, I want to thank everybody who had a part in this and nominating me for this award. It's something I never ever thought I'd get, but anyway, I will accept it. And real quick, I want to thank my wife. She's up back there for putting up with me going to all these meetings and whatnot, and giving me 3 wonderful children and 3 wonderful grandchildren. Other than that, I probably should go sit down. Thanks again.
I'd like to ask all of the award recipients to please convene in the hallway for photographs. Thank you. Okay. Next item, consent agenda. The following items have been grouped together and are hereby noticed as consent agenda items to expedite action on routine matters, which may not require public discussion. The Commission may vote to approve these matters as presented. Commission members may remove certain items if further public input or discussion is deemed necessary. First item, approval to accept a donation in the amount of $100 from Terry and Linda Weisner of Charlestown, New Hampshire, to be utilized by the Owlbrook Hunter Education Center. Next item, approval to accept the donation in the amount of $500 from the Point of Fish and Game Club Incorporated in memory of Steve Cushane to be utilized by the Let's Go Fishing program. Next item, approval to accept the donation in the amount of $18.42 from Thomas McAllister of Bow, New Hampshire, to be deposited into the small gifts and donation account. Next item, approval to accept a donation in the amount of $25 from Lawrence and Christine Lapierre of Garnet, New Hampshire, in memory of John Tammy, to be deposited into the small gifts and donations account. Next item, approval to accept a donation in the amount of $30 from the Woodland Heights School, Waconia, New Hampshire, in memory of Charlie Dwinell, to be deposited into the small gifts and donations account. And last item, approval to accept a donation in the amount of $50 from Matt Gill of Bedford, New Hampshire, in memory of Martin Bobby Bernard, to be utilized by the Wildlife Division's Game Management Program.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that all consent agendas be accepted.
Okay, motion made by Commissioner Carr, seconded by Commissioner McGinnis. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? So moved. Next item, approval of game management final rule proposals by Mac Ellenwood.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the Commission. Thank you very much for the opportunity to bring this rule package before you for your consideration and adoption. Today's meeting culminates 4 very busy months of effort on our collective behalf. I'd like to take this time to express my sincere appreciation to our project leaders who've done an excellent job dealing with the rigors of this process for us. They're top flight professionals. We're lucky to have them, and I appreciate all they do on our collective behalf. I'd also like to thank Kent, who serves as a sort of center of activity regarding this effort. He's done a spectacular job staying both on top of the species project proposals, but also the process in terms of the meeting arrangements, the reservations, and the putting together presentations, not to mention his hard work on the actual rule language that we have to have in place step by step as we proceed through this process. So thank you very much, Kent, as well. I'd like to start by briefly reminding you that in January, following a pretty rapid data assessment effort by our staff, we brought before you preliminary proposals for your consideration. Many of those proposals are still part of this package, but in February, after your input and vetting by the department, we brought a more refined package, which we refer to as the initial rule package before you on February 14th. You voted to support us moving ahead with that package. And as I proceed through the rules today, I'm going to refer, when I make a reference to no change, I'm referring to that initial approved package that you considered. We have at this point, because we've given this presentation 5 times now, this will be the 6th. For those of you reckless enough to participate in each and every meeting, we have pulled out all the background information that I think at this point you're probably pretty familiar with. And we've gone right to brass tacks in terms of the proposal to expedite the process. In any instance where a change has been made as a result of public input, there are very few, but when that has occurred, I will make a point of pointing that out to you. Those items are in red and underlined. Just to give you a little background, Kent and I aspired to standardized colors in this, but because this projects come from different individuals using different technology, we aren't always able to make changes in color that we'd like to. Remember, we have 6 or 7 different projects coming together in the final proposal. Long and short of it is, the one thing we could do to identify change that should be a particular importance to you is to underline those items, and I'll point them out to you. So there you have it. And I will begin. Please ask questions as I go. If you have any technical questions, I will refer them to our project leaders who are all here in the front of the room. So regarding the proposal to allow for the use of crossbow during our existing archery season, there is no change. We advocate that this is a good and logical step in our efforts to manage the deer population in that unit. And I think it is the logical next step as we liberalize that and try to maintain good open land within that unit. With regards to allocation of either sex days for the 18 to 20 management units that we deal with from a deer perspective, there is no change from our initial proposal. All those days remain as initially proposed. If you'd like, I can go through each WMA, or I can simply move ahead with the understanding that you've seen this 3 or 4 times before, and it's your discretion, whatever you'd like.
Does anyone have a question on their own WMA on the proposal?
Yeah, I do, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Is this the time that you want to address that?
Well, I mean, he's asking if he wants to go through the whole thing, or if you have a specific question on that WMA right now, then he'll answer it, rather than going through every single one.
Yeah, I think it's reasonable for you, Commissioner, to ask that question now.
Okay.
Glad to entertain it.
Okay. At the hearings up north, you'll remember, Mark, the Mcinnis Valley Fish and Game Club came in with a proposal for a doe permit system. I did quite a lot of research up there, checked with quite a lot of people in the majority of the county, and that wasn't totally supportive of most of the people that I either called or they called me. So I'm not supporting a doe tag system for up there for what Mcinnis Valley wanted. They came up to me after the hearing and said if we can do something about another doe day, they would gladly not even consider the doe tag system, and they'd be happy with that. I have talked to, matter of fact, I talked to the lieutenant up there. Some of you may not know it. I'm a retired game warden. I was a game warden up in this area for over 30 years. I have never seen so many deer in the spring as I have this year. Mike Godzik, who was a retired fish and game biologist up there, came up to me the other day and he says, we're going to start killing some deer, because if the hunters don't kill them, when we get a bad winter, they're going to die. Wayne Saunders, who I think is here, I hope he skipped out, because I'm highlighting him right now. He's the present lieutenant up there, and he's never seen as many deer in 3 zones. I'm just talking about 3 units. A, B, and C2. If you notice up there, they all have 1 day of either section. I would like to see another day in the firearm season of either section in those 3 zones. The rest of the county, I don't think can support it. I've got quite a lot of documentation from the people up there that say that there's deer everywhere, and they're out. I mean, you can't, it's fantastic to see them, and everybody's going to say, well, why do you want to shoot them? My whole concern and fear is that if the hunters don't take them, that the winter may. We had a fairly decent winter up there. Will said that it was not a bad winter up there overall. I think we're going to have an awful lot of fawns, and you biologists probably know that as well as anybody. We're going to have a lot of deer to hunt this year, and if the hunters don't take some of them, and we have a bad winter, we're going to have a lot of them die. Back years ago when I was a game warden, we had what was a deer mortality line. Myself, and I think Wayne had done it since, would walk with 2 biologists, Mike Godzik and Carl Strong. They were biologists up north at the time. Will's up there now, and Jill. We would walk a dedicated painted line through the deer yards. Speaking of deer yards, why have so many deer if we have no home for them? The deer yards up there have been cut. I mean, the softwood has been cut. That's what houses these deer in the wintertime. We need those houses for the deer. If they were able to go anywhere this year, fantastic this year. They were able to go. If we have a lot of winter like we normally have up there, my fear is we're going to have deer die. And I, for one, would like to see a hunter take that deer than Mother Nature take that deer. Mr. Chairman, that's my recommendation. I would like to, would you want a proposal now?
I think we went back on that, and
okay.
we haven't got to where we're going to accept.
Well, that's
yet,
why I was
so,
waiting
yeah.
later on, but if you wanted me to run my mouth now, so I did.
Yeah, no, that's fine.
Again.
Well, thank you very much. Appreciate the comment. Our decisions as to how many days we issue is a function of a plan that we have in place that you're familiar with, our game management plan. The considerations that go into that include the number of adult males taken, but also the health of the deer yards as reported by our regional biologists. While we agree we don't want to waste deer, we also recognize that in order to grow populations, you have to be able to add to them to get to your goals, and that not all that incremental growth is wasted to winter. Some number of deer die in every year. We know that, driven by winter severity, that oscillates quite dramatically. But at this point in time, we feel like, based on the input we received from the region, it would include the likes of Andy Timmons, who's here, but also Will Stats, who does most of our habitat work up there. We're in pretty good place. I'd like to give Dan Bergeron, our Deer Project leader, the opportunity to speak more specifically to the condition of that unit, those units.
Yeah, I mean, I'll note that really A, B, and C2 also are at the lower end of what our objectives are for those units, so we were kind of at a stretch even maintaining 1 day during the firearms and muzzleloaders in terms of still allowing that population to maintain itself near the objective. We do account for winter mortality when setting either sex days, and you know we had issues. The department had issues in the past with being too liberal with doe harvest, and what happens is when you're too liberal with your doe harvest and you do get a severe winter, you end up losing additional deer. You know, we can't tell what deer are going to be harvested by a hunter that might also die during the winter. But if you put your harvest of adult does too high and you get a severe winter, you usually get additive mortality, which causes your population to decline. The other difference is that either sex days typically target adult female deer, which is what's allowing your population to grow, whereas winter severity, you know, severe winters are going to target your fawns and typically your adult bucks, so it's not really the same segment of the population that's being impacted.
If I could just add a few more comments. The seasons that we're proposing today are predicated off what we saw based on our indices this past fall. There's been no recruitment of additional deer since then. we're very current in our assessment of data in those regions. What you're seeing now, as reported as being particularly abundant, has yet to drop fawns. And so, in fact, it's fewer deer than we actually had in the fall when we hunted them. I guess my point is we're on time relative to our assessment. The deer you're seeing are the same deer we sampled, minus those that we took. But I will tell you, based on my experience, probably better to go with a reliable sampling method than based on anecdotal observations of abundant deer that can be influenced by all manner of things, from prevalence of feeding to particular winter features that might drive deer into positions where they're either more visible or less visible. I appreciate your comments and respect your opinion. We feel best making our decisions based on the methods that we've accumulated over many years of experience and that have served you very well historically, to the extent that we are in pretty good shape deer-wise throughout most of the states. With that, I defer to you to make your decision as you see fit.
Anybody else have any comments?
Can I ask one question, Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Mark, your indices that you're talking about winter severity index. What else do you have, you or the deer biologist down here in Concord know how many deer might die up in Coos County?
Because it's largely driven by unpredictable weather events, we can't predict at this point that next winter won't be particularly severe, and you might suffer a die-off from even lower densities than we currently have. I guess my point is that there's huge variability in the potential influence of the winter, and whether you have low densities or high densities, so long as those deer populations are healthy, the relative impact is similar. I guess what I would respond in addition is to say we have health parameters on your deer, our shared deer, that indicate that that population is healthy. We have a population index that tells us where that population is based on our long trending of buckkill over time. And we have staff in the field who are periodically in deer yards and or out doing deer mortality checks in deer yards, who report back to us to give us a pretty good sense of the carrying capacity of that range. And so it's based on those variables that we calculate where we are and where we might go.
Commissioner Baldwin.
I just have a question, no disrespect to anybody here or anybody in the field, but it seems to what Commissioner Stohl was indicating, that the guys in the field up there, Stats and the Lieutenant and many more up there, and he himself being an ex, that they have indeed seen firsthand a tremendous amount of numbers of deer up there, and I also have a camp up there, and I have got to say that at the end of my road there were 2 deer killed right on Route 3 right at the end of my road, but last summer. That's not scientific, obviously. But if the guys in the field up there are indicating, and they're in the field almost every day, that they're indicating that there really is a considerable number of deer, would that not mean something to the evaluation of these rules that have been requested to increase the opportunity to increase the number somewhat?
Yeah, thank you. And no disrespect, proceed. I understand your point. Yeah. Thank you for that comment. Will Stats has been part and parcel to these decisions and had his input, and has been supportive of the proposal that we have on the table. I just tell you you expose yourself to some peril based on my experience in judging the status of region-wide deer populations based on your visual observations. These proposals, by the way, were vetted with law enforcement staff in District 1 as well. And so we had that conversation. I guess I would ask Dan, was there concern about too many deer based on those meetings?
Not at the time, no.
So, so it becomes sort of anecdotal versus a systematic approach to assessing status of deer based on our buck age kill and based on our field assessments. And beyond that, I fully respect any and all opinions here. It's up to you to make that decision. If it were my decision, I'd go with the facts as we understand them, rather than based on observations, based on drive-bys and whatever field experience might be entailed. But we have the same staff in the field, and we have consulted with those staff on the full district in formulating these proposals.
Any other commissioners have any question on this proposal? You want us to accept these one at a time?
Director, would you offer some comments on how you think systematically we should go through this? Handle it as a species by species?
I would handle it species by species, yeah. Okay. And then, obviously, if you guys decide to make a change in something, we can do that as we go along. I would note, by the way, C2 has gone up in this proposal from nothing to 1 in muzzleloader and firearm. But anyway, yeah, I would make changes as we go, but I'd vote them in
after each species.
After each species.
So I have a couple more deer slides, and then you guys can deliberate and gals as you see appropriate.
Okay.
Okay. So I've already covered either sex days, and while I'm thinking about it, I meant to mention, and I will say, in my 24 years of having worked here, these are the most liberal deer seasons statewide that we've ever offered. We are really maximizing opportunity. I might also mention that the new goals set in the game management plan, generally speaking, we moderated those goals downward to try to provide you with a more realistic template for decision making. We aren't shooting for the sky here. We've moderated those goals, as you'll remember, because you've been party to those plans in the past. We are proceeding with our proposal to issue 2,000 Unit L permits with 1 tag each, and we are committed to initiating an online lottery to facilitate a more equitable way of distributing those permits among our constituents. One change from the initial proposal. This is the first change that I'd like to discuss with you. It's at the bottom of the page. It regards our proposed deer management assistance program based on input from local interests in Hanover specifically. We have come to agree that a parcel size of 1 acre rather than 5, to the extent it's huntable, constitutes a better basis for determining what constitutes the huntable land. So we've reduced that in response to a suggestion from a constituent there. We think that makes more sense. Yes, sir.
Now, they still would have to obtain permission from the abutters, right?
If there's a house, in fact...
Well, I mean, if you go a 1 acre parcel, there's no way that you can be 300 feet away from it.
You need landowner permission to hunt it. You could be using a bow, and in fact...
300 feet. No, we have permission to be on the land.
You could be using a bow effectively in an urban environment where it's legal to hunt if you had landowner permission on a 1 acre piece. Our thinking is that you might have a lot of small pieces that you'd like to add contiguously and facilitate hunting consistent with local interest. But in fact, the answer to your question is not necessarily. The restriction ends at your border. The 300-foot restriction requires you have landowner permission. You can operate within that, but a neighbor who chooses to build close to your property is not in a position to dictate to you whether you can hunt on that property or not. Is law enforcement in the room?
Yes, sir.
Can you help clarify that point for us, please, Major? The question is the 300-foot restriction. My understanding is that it doesn't apply onto your neighbor's property.
That is correct. It does not. As long as you are situated and your target is situated on your property, and that can be the owner or a leasee, you can have a house closer than 300 feet on another property, and that's not a violation.
Thank you very much. Yep, so you all set?
Yep.
Yep, good. Okay, so that is the one change. I believe that, unless you want me to go through details of the Deer Management Assistance Program, that's the only change I propose to this point.
Does anybody, any of the commissioners have any questions on the game management program?
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, I apologize, but I neglected to mention the deer feeding rules.
Okay.
They're also here, and they can be best summarized. The previous slide was simply a statutory language that compels us to establish rules that would, in those instances where there are vehicle collisions occurring and or deer dead or dying or predation occurring, if at our discretion we were concerned that that feeding was problematic, our law enforcement staff would issue a warning, educate, and if the person insisted on persisting with that feeding, could be issued a violation. Let's see, and that ends the deer piece.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Did anybody have questions on the feeding portion? Okay. So now we will take the deer.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion.
Okay, Commissioner Stohl.
Taking the director meeting, good note. Mark, could you go back to the units, to your recommendations on unit A, B, and C?
Sure.
That's like
Yes, I can. Here it is. So it's one muzzleloader and one firearm for both A and B, and it is one muzzleloader and one firearm newly initiated in Unit C2.
I would like to make a motion that C2 stay the same. The director pointed that out. It is new. They never were able to have a doe day then. I'd like to recommend that we leave that alone. I would like to recommend 2 days in firearm season for A and B for firearms, and leave muzzleloader the same with 1 day. What that does is most of the time that your doe days are Wednesday and Thursdays, normally in the middle of the week. Am I correct on that?
Yes, sir.
So it's not a weekend hunt. I don't think it's going to stress the deer herd, but the deer need to be taken. Some of those deer need to be taken. I'd rather see a hunter taken.
So, to clarify your proposal, you're accepting the deer rules as presented with the exception of adding a day to A and B.
Firearm season, yeah.
For the firearm season.
Yeah.
Okay, just so we're clear on the proposal. Yeah. Anyone second?
If that's the motion, I second the motion.
Seconded by Commissioner Baldwin. What, Mark?
Mr. Chairman, will there be discussion?
That's what I was just going to get to.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So we've got a proposal and we've got it seconded. Now we're open to discussion. Does someone have discussion?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. Dan Bergeron would like to speak again.
Yeah, I'll just note that, given our data, which has served us pretty well at setting these either sex days in the past, these populations have actually declined a little bit and are at the low end of what our population objectives are for the unit. And we are already maxed out, at least what the data would suggest, for either sex days that will still allow either a steady or growing population to maintain it at goal. In additional data, the firearm season for A or B would predict that population would decline further below the goal which and if we get a severe winter, it will decline even further. And then the next go around, we will most likely, if we are that far below goal, would not be able to offer any either sex hunting for quite some time until that population rebounds.
Mark, can I offer?
Barry, you got a comment?
I was going to see if Dan had a comment. I'm good.
Okay.
If I could add, oh, excuse me.
Mark, I have a comment. I think it was discussed, but it didn't sink in. And to Eric's, Commissioner Cole's observation and his constituents, I'm seeing that in J2 as well, in Belknap County. Seeing more deer than we've ever seen. Dodged a few the other night. They're moving around, but they've moved around all winter. So the question is, can you have the same amount of deer but see them more because the winter was less severe? And they were pouring up acorns, you know, it was a little thaw a month ago. I had 11 in my yard. I didn't know I had a deer yard there, but there were a bunch of deer, and I'd seen them intermittently on my road. But is that possible that they're just the same amount of deer but moving around more because of the less severe winter?
Yes, absolutely. When winters aren't as severe, deer are able to move more freely. You know, and depending on what the weather's like, what natural food sources are like, if there's people feeding around you, all those things can impact what you're going to see for deer in any given location. You know, there's very rigorous techniques that are used to index deer numbers based on observations, and even those there's a high amount of error involved in them. But to just assume that you can take a collection of random observations and make decisions based on that, I think, is dangerous.
The other point that I'd like to build on from Dan was his comment that the impact of winters becomes more severe as the health of deer herd declines. And so the tipping point for an animal is decreased as you exceed the health parameters that we impose on the deer herd. These deer are still very healthy. And so reducing them by adding either sex day is not going to change the impact of a severe, unpredicted winter. If, on the other hand, you had 100 deer per square mile, a deer population density, which I've worked with in some southern New England states, then it takes very little. And so I guess the point is, there's quite a dynamic here at play. And I would just reiterate, this has worked very well for decades. We've brought our state to very healthy numbers. We respect Commissioner Stohl's opinion, but if you ask us, we're sticking to our guns. And Andy Timmons, who works up there, would like to add a comment.
It's been referenced, but I do want to point out to folks that where you're seeing deer up north is not the same as where deer are winter, and I think Eric knows that very well. Yes, we're seeing a lot of deer at feed sites, but if you go into some of the historical deer yards, you're not necessarily seeing a lot of deer because those deer are shifted. So the deer become more visible roadside due to feeding. Another thing is, while I think we'd agree that it's been a fairly mild winter all in all, I don't know that it's going to end up being a real mild spring in the North Country. Spring green-up certainly appears stalled, and winter is far from over in Unit A and Unit B and even some of the C units. So, you know, we may still experience increased deer loss as we move forward into spring, depending on when things green up. So, some things to keep in mind when you're making these decisions.
Okay. Anybody else have any?
I have part B.
Anything more?
To add, if you added an either sex a day to Commissioner Cole's areas of concern, how many more deer would be harvested roughly? That's a midweek hunt, right? Yeah.
We do have the ability to provide that estimate to you. Dan, do you happen to know that?
Not the specific number off the top of my head. We could figure it out. But what I can say is that when Again, we take other mortality factors into account, average winter severities, what we predict how that will increase mortality, and our data suggests that an increase in either sex days beyond what we've provided would cause a decline in the population.
So I do want you to understand that the proposal in hand is based on a calculation of what additional increment of deer could be taken. We have that predictive ability. We don't have it in our hands as we speak because the number of permutations of those questions exceed our memories. But the information is available. Correct, Dan?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we run models that predict these numbers. Excuse me.
Commissioner Carr?
This is a question for Dan. Is the goal in A and B greater than the line, or is it right at it? Obviously, we increased in C2, so that goal is either above goal or thereabouts. I'm trying to find out where A and B is as far as to the goal. Are we at a critical point where we're going to go below goal if this occurs?
Yeah, and all three of those units are literally right on the lower 12.5%. So they're, technically they're below goal, below the actual goal line, but they're within minus 12.5% of that. So they are at the lowest possible point around the goal that we could still offer any either sex days, which is why we're being somewhat conservative with the either sex day allocation, and even a slight increase. And the other, there's a lot that plays into this. If we add one more day and we happen to get snow that day up there, then you could have a much larger kill than predicted. And these are proposals for the next 2 years. We don't know what those winters are going to hold, but what we do know is, based on average winter conditions, adding an additional day of either sex hunting during the firearm seasons would cause the populations to decline further, and they're already at as low as they could possibly be for us to allow what we're allowing.
So what you're telling me, you see the decrease towards the cutoff, if you will, in the past few years?
Yeah, C2 I think grew a little bit, but it's still right at the lower end of what the goal is.
You don't have the graphs loaded.
Yeah, do we not have the graphs?
That's all right. I can't remember it, but I'm trying to get a sense of the time frame. Has it been increasing for the last 2 years, 5 years, 7 years?
Yeah, I have to.
Thereabouts.
While he looks for that, I just reiterate, I think a key point is, in an effort to accommodate recreation, we have gone as far as we can with those 1 days to still reasonably appear to be approaching those goals. So it's a very liberal proposal for us. And I might add, C2 was added because of concern about a disparity in the number of days in those 3 units because of purported movement of hunting pressure. So we equalize them specifically to try to minimize that.
So Unit A had declined actually from last year. B had increased very slightly, but had declined the 3 years previous. And C2 had declined from last year. And all, again, are at the lowest limit that we would even consider allowing either sex days.
Thank you.
Okay, any other comments? I have a motion on the floor and seconded. So, no more comment, we'll call for a vote. Sound reasonable? Okay. All in favor of the proposal on the table, which is the deer proposal as presented, with the exception of 1 additional day of regular firearms in Unit A and also in Unit B. All in favor of the proposal signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, we got 1 hand, we've got, show of hands. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, all opposed to the proposal, show of hands. 5. Okay, so that proposal was defeated.
Chairman?
Yes.
I'd like to thank everybody for the discussion. If anybody thinks that the new commissioner from Coos County is going to come down here and be quiet, you got news coming to you. And thank you, Bob.
Oh, thank you.
Well, wait a minute, because now,
I move that we accept their proposal.
okay, Commissioner McGinnis.
Just a quick question for Mark, very easy one. On the
Okay.
Hanover situation, are they getting additional permits once they meet the criteria of the forms that have to be filled out and what you're requesting?
We anticipate and have had positive feedback from Hanover.
Yep.
The change that we've made regarding parcel size has no bearing at this point on how many permits might be issued. And I don't believe we've made an assessment as to how many permits would be issued. And we wouldn't until we had in hand their products.
Yeah,
for us.
but there is that opportunity once they meet the criteria that you need.
Yes.
Correct,
yes.
Dan? Yeah.
And we did
That's
this
all.
specifically with Hanover in mind.
Yes, exactly. They did a nice job.
Thank you.
Okay, back to our proposal at Hampton. We have a motion made to accept the proposal as presented by Commissioner McGinnis. Do we have a second?
Second.
All right, seconded by Commissioner Stohl. Any discussion? All in favor? Aye. Opposed? So moved. Thank you, Mark.
Thank
That
you.
was easy.
It was a good discussion. We appreciate it. Thank you very much. Moving to Moose, there are no proposed changes in the permit allocation that Christine first offered to you on February 14th. And the total lottery permissions would be 51, and if I recall correctly, there's also one permit for the foundation and one for what we currently call the Untitled 53. That covers the Moose proposal.
Okay. Anybody would like to make a motion on the Moose proposal? Commissioner
Make
Carr.
a motion that we accept the department's proposal for the 2018-19 season. 18.
Okay, motion made by Commissioner Carr, seconded by Commissioner Temple. Any discussion? All in favor of the proposal signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So moved.
Thank you very much. The Bear proposals, there's been no change in the Bear proposals as presented on February 14th and through the 3 public hearings.
Okay.
I can walk through each if you like, but I think you're familiar with those and have considered them in the past. It's up to you.
Anybody have any questions?
Move to approve and present.
Okay, motion made by Commissioner Stohl, seconded by Commissioner Carr. Any discussion? All in favor of the proposal signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So moved.
Thank you. Wild turkey proposals. There have been no changes in our proposal package today from the original proposal package presented to you on February 14th and following our 3 public hearings. And just in the form of a quick review, I will remind you that we have proposed starting beginning in May of 2019 on May 1st rather than May 3rd, which is a proposal that came through the commission. And we have proposed allowing for a second gobbler to be taken in 6 of our strongest wildlife management units in southern New Hampshire, which means that from this point going on, beginning in May of 2019, hunters can take 2 gobblers during the spring, or they can take 1 gobbler during the spring, and a second bird in those units holding fall turkeys, firearms. In addition, somewhat noteworthy is the fact that based on our criteria for qualifying for inclusion in the fall shotgun season, Unit D1, which is the most northerly unit that is currently open to firearms shotgun hunting in the fall, is being pulled off that list. It has experienced a slow decline in take, and as a consequence, we are pulling it out of that northerly package. And that covers turkey.
Okay. I have a few comments on the turkeys. The one thing that I've got quite a bit of input on has been that second spring bird, and not the fact that they could take the second bird, but apparently the initial proposal where they couldn't take their second bird till after the 15th had quite a bit of support, but they're worried about there being a conflict of both of being able to take the two birds before that due to the amount of turkey hunters we have versus the amount of turkey habitat that we have. And rather than have one person, you know, basically hog two birds, why not give everyone a chance for the first 2 weeks and then open it from there?
I guess I would just offer some personal comments on that. Ted compared other states. They don't feel a need to do that, albeit New Hampshire is neither Vermont nor Maine in terms of turkey abundance. If it was broken into two component parts, I believe you would reduce the potential for conflicts, which is the point of some of the criticism that people are making. However, when we vetted this, there were concerns about enforcement that prompted us to make it two birds throughout the season rather than two birds, one on one side of the season, one on the other. So at this point, it's your discretion. I give Ted the opportunity to comment, but I don't anticipate that that's a critical issue. To us, it was a concern for enforcement purposes, and that's what blended those two periods.
Can you expand on the enforcement concerns?
It wasn't entirely clear to me. I'm not a law enforcement expert. I guess I would ask the Major if he would like to speak to that, but I think anytime you make rules more complex, the potential for people to inadvertently violate those rules increases, and as I recall, it was a desire for simplicity.
I would concur with that, and I think that was really just the sole purpose of it, just to create one less opening day, if you will, just to create some simplicity and less chance for error.
It's a question that I think we all get this letter about 410 questions. So my question is, I don't know if it's a question for Ted or a question for law enforcement, why these 410s are banned. The letter talks about cripples or whatever. I'm just trying to get a sense of why it was banned.
I'll quickly respond, and then I'll ask Ted to add further detail. 410s weren't actively banned. In the past, they were never suitable for the taking of turkeys, given the ballistics and the lack of the tungsten loads that now exist. And so we didn't propose it. We are open to considering it in concert with the commission. I would suggest that if we did so, we might do so not today, but in a more deliberative process where more information can be brought to bear on the issue. And I would like to give Ted the floor after the director speaks.
Yeah, just a comment. It was brought to our attention really pretty recently that one manufacturer is making these tungsten loads that clearly kind of meet the test of whacking a turkey, but there's the issue of, okay, so do you really want to approve one load from one manufacturer and I'm not really sure how law enforcement is going to deal with that, or the whole hand load thing or whatever. So it's recognize the flip side of that was about, you know, kids easier to handle for kids. I mean, that was what their push is about, is that a kid can shoot a 410 easier than, say, a 20 gauge. But
I'm not so sure.
well, I'm not so sure either. You know, I think that, you know, we just, this, you know how it is when, you know, especially you guys that are more into the, get into the gun thing, when we start sitting around here and start talking ballistics, the whole friggin' thing goes right down the in a swirl. So I'm just not, I don't know, it would almost, I think, needed a little separate discussion, but, you know, Ted may have some commentary also.
I also feel that it needs, not to do it here and do it at some other time, but I think it's a legitimate question, and it's worthy of our attention.
I do also, I just didn't know if it's right now.
Yeah. I don't, even if we wanted to, we couldn't do anything on it because it wasn't part of the public hearings or rulemaking package, correct?
It's pushing the threshold. We're not positive how the state would respond, but we didn't propose it. We had just heard about it. It's not in a package. It didn't receive a lot of public scrutiny because it wasn't in the package.
I think we'll bring that up under new business and, you know, discuss it there, because there's a bunch of issues with it.
Right.
So we'll take it up later. So on the turkey hunting, anybody else have any?
I was going to make a few comments
on
the group. Vermont and Maine, of course, the bordering states have turkey hunting. Vermont longer than us, and for 27 years, Vermont has allowed the second gobbler to be taken without, I've talked to my counterparts in those two states, no significant problem or decrease in turkey availability. And the last 10 years, an average of hunters in Vermont taking a second gobbler was 22.3%, so that's not a high percent. As far as the 410 gauge, in all the years I've been familiar with turkeys and going to other states, I don't recall anybody hunting turkeys with a 410. It's significantly less gauge than a 20 gauge. And I mean, when I was young, 10 and 12 years old, you know, you used a 20 gauge. And today there are many 20 gauges that are very suitable for high-powered loads or for small size minors, young people. And you have to remember too, only 12% of our turkey harvest in the spring is taken by the youth. And I don't know of any adult that's going to want to use a 410 gauge when he has 20 and 12 and 10 gauge available. So, didn't see the real need for it at this point in time.
Thank you, Ted. So, Commissioner Stohl.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to see if the Wildlife Division could check. I'm not going to raise any issue about the fowl season up north, so don't get nervous, Mike. I would like to see if you could check on, and I think just a push of a button on a computer will answer both these questions. How many turkeys were shot up in the units up that have no fowl season up north, up in my area? How many were shot? And if you can look at the registration forms and find out where those people came from, I gotta assume that most of them came from up there. Not many people are gonna drive up there to hunt turkeys when you get plenty of turkeys down here.
You mean actual towns?
Excuse me?
Actual towns in Coos County, right?
Right. The ones who actually shot birds up north.
Yeah.
And number two, who up north had turkey permits? And I think you're probably going to find out those are both of them are going to end up being the same. Like if you have 50 people up there that got permits, to hunt turkeys and 50 birds were shot, and I think it was somewhere around that last year. It means that 100% of the hunters out there shot birds. But it'll give you a rough idea of, because your formula that you use is how many birds are shot as to how many birds there are up there.
But you got to remember, no more than 20% of those with a permit successfully got a turkey. Maybe a little bit higher in some of the better areas.
But if both those things were checked, that would give you a rough idea of what percentage of the locals that shot birds up there. Again, my whole thing is, and the only thing I'm asking is, how many people shot birds up in those areas? Were they locals?
Right, and we can do that. We'd be glad to do so. The other point I would make is your previous comments regarding the index that we use was taken very seriously. We've done a fair amount of work in response to those comments. We agree in part that your comments are valid, and so we've had and did an analysis on other independent analysis that gave us some insight into the relative abundance of turkey. So your comments are well respected, and we spent a fair amount of time trying to tease out, based on grouse routes, which are distributed throughout the state, what the relative gobbling rate was on North Country versus different areas of the state. So, no, thank you for the comment.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Can you share how you evaluate the risk of conflicts between hunters and landowners in the second gobbler? So that's one of the concerns I've heard, is that as you increase the hunting pressure, you increase the likelihood that landowners decide to make their property available. And I'm wondering whether you have data points that you rely on when you evaluate that risk.
Directly, no, we don't. We have the benefit of our field force and our both law enforcement and wildlife biologists who until it's happened, can't predict what the outcome might be, but we're cognizant of it. We manage with an eye towards minimizing, and I can only say that a multitude of other states do it. It hasn't proven to be an issue that they've reported on, and we work very closely with our peers, but no, I don't know of a metric that can tell you that until after the fact. Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, I just have to say that after 25 years or so of dealing with this stuff, that is a very common thing we hear with many of our proposals, that if you do this, landowners will post land. So it's not an uncommon thing to hear, but as Mark says, it's a very difficult thing to actually quantify.
If I could add, in the case of deer, however, we've experimented with liberal allocations of either sex deer, gotten enough feedback from our law enforcement and biological staff in the field regarding problems that we're developing to pull back. Thus, the limit of 10 or 11 either sex days in the southeast corners of the state, and our decision to issue additional permits rather than risk creating additional conflicts and closing land. So we're sensitive to it. It's hard to quantify.
One other question, if I may. Do Maine and Vermont constrain the zones where they allow their second gobbler to be taken as we would?
I don't believe they do presently, but I defer to Ted. He goes to those technical meetings with that businesses exchange. Ted, does Maine restrict the second gobbler region of the state? I believe Vermont is wide open at this point.
Yeah, Vermont is wide open. I'm not absolutely sure of Maine because they've opened some of their northern areas in recent years, and it's a bigger state, so I'd have to check on that some more. Their northern part of Maine is treated a little somewhat different than the southern half.
Yeah, as those programs evolve, my guess is that they started that way, developed a sense of comfort, and then expanded. The irony of it is that in starting small, you risk a problem in terms of moving too many hunters into the area, and that's the balancing act. I'm not sure how to resolve that.
Just a comment, you know, I was at the Northeast Association meeting this weekend, and I think Mass and Connecticut, or Connecticut may have already done it, and Mass is moving to 3 birds. Feel free to leave. You know, our system that we've got here, that second bird, if you take it in the spring, will come out of your fall. You know, you're still only getting 2 tags, but I think Mass and Connecticut are going to 3, two in the spring, 1 in the fall. So, and if you look at their situations relative to dealing with landowner issues, I think that they're probably in a worse position than we are in that respect. I mean, let's face it, a lot of those landowner issues revolve around the fact that some people just don't do the things they should, or bother to ask, or do whatever. So, but
if I could, I'd just say your focus is a good one. New Hampshire, I think, somewhat uniquely continues to retain that open land tradition that even other states within northern New England are beginning to lose. And so it's a cherished resource that we need to manage very carefully.
Commissioner, you want to?
So Ted, question for Ted. Vermont versus New Hampshire terrain for turkey hunting. Vermont's more open. How do you equate the two, differentiate the two? Do you have a lot of open farmland in Vermont versus New Hampshire?
Vermont continues to have 7 times more dairy farms than New Hampshire's, down to less than 100. Vermont is a little bigger, has 4 more counties, units, and you could drop me down blindfolded in a parachute somewhere in Vermont and I'd know I was in Vermont. As soon as you cross that Connecticut River, it's kind of mountain goat country. It's different.
Yeah, so for prime New Hampshire turkey taking geography, it's a little tighter, where the landowner concerns come in. But I'm hearing from the turkey hunter community that 2 gobblers would be great, but not on the same day. So spreading that out is becoming more clear.
Not on the same day, is that what you said?
Right, to spread that out.
We would require you to check one before you
register on the second.
Register one before you go.
That gives an opportunity for someone to get in the territory right behind you.
Well, remember, you can only hunt till noon.
That's the point.
So you get one, you go check it, and come back the next day, I guess. But I mean, I think there'd be some concern about turkeys without checking, because we already have plenty of trouble with people hitting multiple birds by accident, even with a single shot. And if some people thought they could get 2 birds and they started sort of spraying the flock, if you will, we could have even more of those accidental multiple kills. So
that's a good point.
I think your focus on the quality of the hunt is an important one, and we respect your discretion in dealing with that issue. We are not Vermont. We are not Massachusetts. Our thresholds for liberalization by necessity are somewhat lower than those states because they have better turkey range than we do. This is true, by the way, for deer as well.
I mean, it's not like we've jumped right into this liberalization with a longer fall season or a 2-bag limit. This will be the 38th year we've had a turkey hunting season, so we've been trying to be conservative and go gradually.
Commissioner McGinnis?
Have a motion to approve it?
No.
Motion to approve as presented.
Motion made by Commissioner McGinnis. Seconded by Commissioner Carr. Looks like we had quite a discussion. Is there any more? Okay, all in favor of the proposal presented, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So moved.
Thank you very much.
Oh, Mark?
Yes.
One thing I'd like to mention, which I should have in the beginning, and I keep getting sidetracked, is I would like to welcome Commissioner McGinnis, our newest commissioner from the Seacoast, who was just appointed. Okay, now it's back to you, Matt.
Good enough. So fur bearers, this will be a little more colorful conversation. We have, as you would hope, carefully considered diversity input we've received on this. And we have also considered, given the limitations on the data that we have to make these decisions, very carefully considered different scenarios. I'll just preface the next few slides with our conclusion that a better way at this point to control fur take on these populations that have, experienced a precipitous decline over the last 20 years is to manage the bag rather than the season length. We heard loud and clear from our constituents that they wanted to retain that opportunity, and so it became our responsibility to figure out how to get to where we think we need to be, while still providing a maximum window of opportunity for those trappers who'd like to exercise that. In addition, I have to say that so much as the trapping data we receive is not temporal, in that whether you took it in the first week or the last week, we can't track that, or at least historically haven't. Our ability to devise seasons that satisfy a reduction are limited. For instance, which week or which month, and what will be the result. So what we did instead was we looked at the take amongst trappers and calculated what the impact would be if we reduced the bag limit or established bag limits, knowing that trapper X may take 10, and so if you reduce the bag limit to 5, there's 5 off the top. You put that ceiling across all the trappers, what percentage of loss is accrued? That was the exercise that we embarked upon, and that's how we made the following decisions. The data is not perfect. Trapping take is highly variable from year to year, so the averages that you use are there's a lot of variance between those annual takes. And to add complexity, the farther you reach back, the more you get into a historic rather than a present day scenario. And so you want to limit your sampling to what constitutes something akin to where you are today. Okay, enough said. So we have a bunch of underlining here. We have reverted back to our original seasons for fishing. From December 1st through January 31st for hunting, December 1st to December 31st for trapping, and the bag limit that brings us something akin to a 30% reduction in take is 2. And we experimented with different values, trying to find a reduction that we thought was reasonable based on the circumstances that population is facing. We chose not to have a mixed bag of 2 and 4 or 3 and 5 because we figured there's something operating on these populations that's reducing them. In those areas where we have a little better status of population, it makes sense to try to get ahead of it rather than to continue to allow more liberal take in that area and possibly drive it down. So that was our rationale. So the proposal on the table is back to the normal seasons, which are fairly liberal in timing, but a fairly constraining bag limit of 2 statewide. Red fox, we did the same thing, and we did the same thing with gray fox. So we're back to the more traditional, the traditional seasons, and yet we have severely constrained the ability to take these animals while they're at their current population. And if we are in a position to influence the direction of these populations, it makes sense to go low, standardize, see what happens, and make a decision from that point. That was our rationale. And so you have standard seasons with a statewide baglet of 3 red fox and 3 gray fox. And I'll point out there's some differences in the relative position of those species in terms of the steepness of the decline and or the stability, as is the case in Fisher. Fisher's very low, but currently relatively stable. These animals are still on a sharp decline. We could have distinguished between red and gray fox in terms of bag limit, but we think we complicate the world when we have 2 foxes being trapped with different bag limits, so we went with 3 and 3. That was our rationale. That is the proposal.
Okay. Anybody have any comments on the fur bearer proposal? 3 species. Commissioner Carr.
Mr. Pat, are you comfortable with this?
Yeah, it's very conservative, and it
That's
will
all I need to
reverse if it
Thank
happens
you.
from that.
Yeah, like a director. You know, we no statistician, but you know, we did some real hashing of this in the staff, and then Kent did his sort of statistical voodoo. And one of the issues you need to realize is when we started looking at the history of it, in many of these cases, you had situations where sort of 25% of the trappers or hunters or whatever are catching most of the critters. So if you try to do it with seasons, it's likely that those guys who are determined and really good, it isn't going to reduce the take nearly the way it does if we let the opportunity go wide for everybody, but keep the bag limits low for everybody. And so, you know, that's my sort of layman's way of being able to understand what's going on here, is that, you know, I mean, it's not much different than trout fishing. You know, there's people that could go out there and catch 30, and a couple people, you know, and a lot of, then there's the masses of us that might catch 3, and if you're going to save them, you need to keep everybody at the same level. And that's kind of how this came about, and it was a pretty intense discussion of a couple of hours to wrap heads around the data on it. Okay. Anybody else have a comment? Commissioner Carroll?
I'm going to make a motion that we approve of this fur bearer proposal.
Okay, motion made by Commissioner Carr.
I'll second.
Seconded by Commissioner Moet. Discussion. All in favor of the proposal as presented, signify by aye.
Aye.
Opposed? So moved.
Thank you. Small game proposals. There are no changes in the initial rule package. That package include identification of days as they relate to closed days during the stocking, the extension of the cocktail season. We're open by 1 month, as well as the gray squirrel season by 1 month. And then modification of snowshoe hare live capture. Just like to give you just a bit of background on this because it's become very controversial. We've had this rule in place for better than 10 years with no adverse impact. 7 of 13 Northeast states have a very similar program, although not all of them have snowshoe hares, but for historic purposes, there has a long-standing tradition of allowing, in order to safeguard the continued existence of these beaver clubs, the live capture of animals and the parlance of that ownership to those individuals. I think it's helpful for people who are critical of this to understand that the individuals who deal with these animals value them more than anybody else I know, given their importance to the tradition. And these animals do not and/or are not exposed to capture by the trailing dogs. Beagles are well behind the trail left by these very fast animals. There's adequate cover as I understand it, and these parcels tend to be, and I would look for confirmation because in hindsight I wish I had, but I haven't visited all 5 of these sites, but you're talking about 50 and 100 plus acres, well managed, well populated. There is a ceiling, despite this liberalization, the same ceiling that has existed for the last 10 years in terms of capture continues to exist. It's a maximum of 20 animals per club. That hasn't changed. And there are 5 clubs that qualify for this activity. And so you have a potential of 100 animals statewide, which is something akin to 1 per every 90 square miles in the state of New Hampshire. In fact, that 100 has never been achieved. The norm is closer to 40 to 50, although I've seen it as high as 65. And so now you're down to 1 animal per every 150 square miles. So in terms of adverse impact, there is none. As hunters, you can take, depending where you are in the season, 2 or 3 per day. Likely, as we've been here today, we've lost 25 animals in the state because of predation. So, you know, these are selected species. These species we refer to as rapid producers. They cycle very fast. They produce lots of young. The turnover is very rapid. And while I understand, and we share some resonance about the notion of transferring ownership of a live animal, but it's typically a dead animal. That's the tradition. There are other circumstances, for instance, in some of the raptor world and some other circumstances where, in fact, that precedent has been set. The other thing to know is this was not something we initiated. If you have concerns about that, club went to a legislator who said, we're going to open this up for cottontails and snowshoe hare statewide. And we said, whoa, whoa, whoa. We have a program in place. You may not be aware of it, but it has many constraints that help to ensure that it won't have an adverse impact on this important resource. If you're willing, we would prefer that you allow us to handle that through rulemaking. And to their great credit, they said, yes, you guys handle it. If you don't, we may act, but we trust you even more about it than we do. And that's what brings us to this issue, just so you have the full background. It came to us from the legislature. And
if I may, so the Beagle clubs, the single biggest issue for the Beagle clubs was the original program from, do you remember, Moose, was it like 2006 or something?
I don't remember the year. I know it was Spacetown.
Right.
Yeah, and I think it was 6 and then implemented in 7.
Right. So and it was a result of the fact that due to some disease issues and stuff, they couldn't get rabbits from Canada anymore, which is where it was coming. They were coming from for training before. So, but one of the requirements was that all the rabbits would be caught up north, and so there's 1 club's in Berlin. The rest of them are down in the southern part of the state, and to do live trapping up north was problematic because they didn't have places to stay up there, et cetera, et cetera. Well, apparently one of them was talking to someone who happened to be a state rep, and they frankly didn't know any better, and to come to us and talk about the existing rules, they didn't really understand the difference between legislation and rules. So they showed up with this bill, which was much, much more liberal than what you see here. At the Fish and Game Committee, we, as Mark said, tried to sort of put the brakes on it. Immediately had a arranged for a meeting. They came in the next week, and we put together something that was more liberal, but that we thought we could live with. They were happy with it. That bill is not dead. It's sitting in interim study, waiting to see what we do with this, to be hauled back out if it apparently is not up to certain representatives' standards. So anyway, this is where we're at the moment with it, and again, from a resource aspect, no, there's not any issues with it. So there you have. That's the whole history of the situation, anyway. Anybody have any questions?
Mark, who handles number 3? Ensure that the captured hare and traps are adequate nutrition. Who
that falls to the trapper himself.
Oh, so.
Yeah.
Okay, so.
And we're not in a position to.
So the fox watching the chicken coop make sure that they get fed.
If you perceive them as foxes, I actually don't. Although I understand why you might, until you interact with these individuals and come to appreciate the high value that they place on their dogs in this tradition, I think yes. The short answer to your question is yes, but I think if you got to know them, it might change your perspective. Leave it at that.
I doubt it. That's okay.
It's okay.
Well, a dead rabbit does no good to them, so it's in their own interest to make sure they're well cared for.
And excuse me if I could, dead rabbit also counts against their limit. They know that. And in my experience, they've been significantly undertaking given the opportunity we provide them.
Is it your understanding that there's no non-wild source of hare anymore?
I'm not aware of any source of non-wild hare. Ted has some expertise in both hares and cottontails. I think I'd ask him to speak to that issue.
When I studied snowshoe hares at UNH, and of course I think the world of rabbits and rabbit habitat, there was the two dealers just across the northern Maine border, Harvey Station, Canterbury Station, New Brunswick, and that province allowed, they had so many up there, to sell them to the beagle clubs in northern New England and a little bit in southern New England, and that source dried up about a dozen years ago. There used to be one source in Maine also. So how do you perpetuate your beagle clubs that have been in existence, some for 100 years or more? That was the theory, to be able to live trap a few and to try to propagate some within their 100-acre fenced areas.
Thank you, Ted. Commissioner Moore?
So for beagle, a beagle instinctually, runs the rabbit, and a trained beagle gives the hunter a more ethical shot. So the ability to use live hares to train the dog actually I think is better. I think that's one of the positives.
We see field trials are a big thing with these beagle clubs for many years, just like coon dog trials, bird dog trials, and the 100 acres is fenced is a sizable area. And probably the majority of those snowshoe hares live longer in captivity than they do in the wild. I spent my time helping those beagle clubs with promoting artificial rabbit pellets, barrel feeders, cutting to provide more browse and cover on those areas. We're not talking dozens of beagle clubs. There's only those 5 in the state.
Anybody else?
One last question. So how about the exclusivity of being designated the Beagle Club. The rule or statute requires they be an AKC recognized club. Is that correct?
That resonates, but I would have to check. I don't recall all those details. Kent, do you happen to have that?
I don't know. I'm not the...
There hasn't been a new Beagle Club in New Hampshire in the 46 years I've been around. Just as a...
If I could mention, while Kent looks, our initial rules identified those and said they have to be in existence as of date X because we're concerned about expansion. But as I recall, Legislative Services subsequently advised us that we couldn't legally do that. My recollection's not great. It was 12 years ago, but I think that's what happened. I know initially they were listed, and they ended up being pulled because I think you're implying is there a way to control, another way to control the potential impact if you thought there was going to be an expansion would be to simply say, statewide, we're allocating 100 hares across how many clubs qualify for this. You'd still achieve the same end.
I looked at the rule. It does not specify that they have to be AKC registered or anything like that. It just specifies Beagle Club. But they do have to be licensed by us as a propagator, in addition to having the permit to capture live hares.
Mr. Chairman, make a motion that we approve the proposal as submitted.
Okay. Motion made by Commissioner Carr, seconded by Commissioner Baldwin. Discussion? What?
I thought this was not a public hearing, though.
So there's no discussion. Is your question on the process or on this proposal?
On one of the lines up there.
Yeah, so there's no public comment on something that's already...
I'll ask Mark after.
Yeah, that's already had a public hearing.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, so motion made, seconded, discussion.
Mr. Chairman, is this for a small game, the whole thing, or just
for? This is for just the. I mean, this is the only time we've been on.
We did this squirrel and cocktail and the closed dates for stocking.
Yeah, but this one right now that we got a motion on is just for the snowshoe hare.
That's your discretion. We haven't voted on the 3 days. I'll go back for you. This is the beginning of small game. We talked about our simply defining those closed mornings when we stock. We talked about an extension in the cottontail rabbit season and the gray squirrel season, and then we focused on this.
Okay, so
the proposal for the entire small game.
All right. Thank you. Okay, perfect. And the second was for saying, okay, so we'll call for a vote. All in favor of the proposal as presented signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Opposed? No.
Two opposed? Okay, ayes have it.
So we had some updates regarding the use of crossbows for big game as a lesser weapon. No change proposed. We've discussed this with you several times in the past, but they are legal for bear, deer muzzleloader, and deer firearms with a crossbow permit in the last case. Plus, we're proposing to clarify that they're legal during deer youth, moose season, fall shotgun turkey season, the youth turkey weekend, and the spring gobber season. In addition, would you like to handle that independently? We have perhaps 3 more slides. These things are all somewhat unrelated, so depends on your memory.
No vote on miscellaneous.
Well, back here a while ago, we were discussing the use of a crossbow for other things, such as coyote and whatnot. Now, did that end up being accepted, or is it still illegal to use a crossbow to take a coyote or a grouse or rabbit?
Ken, can you help us?
Yeah, based on the rules, I believe that no weapon type is specified for small game at all.
Okay, and
So
it would be legal.
For hares or things like that, it currently is legal. This was just associated with a statute that allowed it as a lesser weapon during firearms seasons.
Yeah.
So we opted to go with this list of species here, but for small game, it currently is legal.
Okay, I just wasn't sure what happened with the other part
Yeah.
before, and wondered if that wasn't addressed, why it wouldn't have fallen into play now. But being that it has, then we're all set.
Yeah, I've got to say too, I'm not sure about the fur bearer species, because I recall there was a separate issue, I think, with regard to weapons that we were looking to try to deal with.
This whole thing's very complex. We did not exclude anything that the statutes, to my knowledge, allowed us to exclude. So I don't recall saying, let's not include that. It's largely driven by language in the statutes that authorizes our management of these species. That was our intent anyway.
Right. No, that answers the question. Anybody have any questions on it?
Mr. Chairman, I got a question on the next slide. Are we talking about this one or the next one?
Well, right now we're on just this slide. So we're all set. So I guess the question is, please move to the next slide.
Okay. So for those of you who don't recall, the Connecticut Lakes Headwater Forest, mating opportunities is allocated by a lottery. And we have asked, we've asked to modify the date so that it actually is functional for us as a department. There's circumstances as the dates currently exist where we'd have to gear up the lottery on a weekend in order to enact it, and that's impossible. So this is perfectly fine. It works for us, and I can't anticipate any reason why any constituent would be concerned about this. They're still being satisfied pretty quickly.
Commissioner Stohl.
Is this by rule, Mike?
This is a rule.
And does the advisory committee, I had 2 or 3 people up there call me about this particular issue. Is it for 1 year or 2 years?
We would keep these for 2 years. That's our intent.
It is for 2 years?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. I thought they told me it was for only 1.
This whole package should be viewed as being for 2 years. Excuse me?
Excluding moose.
Excluding moose, thank you, because of the concern about moose. You have flexibility in changing that, but our intent is give us a couple of years to learn from these before we change them.
No, they were requesting 2 years because it's only 1. So
this isn't time limited. Yeah, not time limited.
Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions on this? Okay.
So we're asking, well, actually, in this particular case, law enforcement asked that we honor postmarks as qualifying for deadlines and submittal, which is reasonable. It's something we do with other species. So they're essentially saying, you need to.
Can I sorry to interrupt? I'm not sure you and Eric are talking about the same thing. I think you're are you asking about people that get drawn in the lottery? Are they asking if they get that baiting opportunity for 2 consecutive years?
If they're picked, do they have it for 2 years?
That's what I thought you were asking.
I'm sorry, I missed that point. The answer is no, not as it exists in rules now.
Okay.
We don't.
They wish to have it for 2 years because, you know, by the time you get they're creatures of habit. So by the time you get something going one year, if you haven't got it next year, then somebody else comes in and gets their territory.
You know, if I can elaborate just a little bit, so got one thing you should recall, and they should recall is that the CL, the Connecticut Lakes Headwaters property, is not owned by the state, and the lottery and how many options or how many bait sites are allowed there was a negotiation with the forest land group. And you know, as you may recall, in the old days there was no baiting there, and then when things changed, it was allowed, and then it's kind of been a fight as to how many bait sites. So we had some meetings a while ago with Sampson, is it Rick Sampson? Okay. So, you know, there was a bunch of people saying that, you know, well, it could support all kinds of bait sites and we could do all this kind of stuff. And Rick's commentary was, I live in a state that, in Virginia, that don't allow baiting, and I grew up hunting in Pennsylvania that don't allow baiting, so you know just where I'm coming from. So the bottom line was that we settled on, you know, 40 bait sites, which accommodated pretty much everyone who seemed to be trying to get in the lottery at the time, and with, you know, these basic rules, and you know, kind of going with that to see how it goes. And but you know, to some extent, this thing is still at the sufferance of the underlying property owner, and so, you know, be reluctant to rock that boat.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? And then, as I mentioned, there's postmarks regarding the submission of private land bait permit applications by first Monday in August. Not only do they need to be in, however, if they're postmarked and in the mail and receive them after the fact, they'll still be considered. And that also applies for other species, such as deer, which is a primary user, on the first Monday in October. So we're actually liberalizing the window to accommodate the constituency by allowing a postmarked item to be considered in the allocation. This relates to concerns about certain bat species and wildlife control operator reporting obligations. There's no change in this. We didn't receive any feedback in public hearings regarding this. And then we are advocating that we re-adopt these rules with no changes. Kent has presented this to you in the past. Has no bearing on our constituency. It just rules in place that allow us to do certain things. So, I believe that is the end. If you'd like me to revisit any of these and ask staff to elaborate on them, we're glad to do so. It's a lot to absorb in a few slides. But this is a non-issue. This is an administrative issue encouraged by Paul Sanderson as an issue of efficiency for our department. Let's re-adopt them before we have to review them all. Any questions? I don't feel like we're serving your interests well here. Would you like to go through them again, one at a time, just see them? Or you're all set?
Everybody all set with those? I mean, everybody's read them over anyway, and they haven't changed.
That's right.
So
that's all correct.
All right, do I hear a motion from anyone? Motion by Commissioner Hodgdon, seconded by Commissioner Stohl. Discussion? Okay. All in favor of the proposals as read, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? So moved.
So the last hurdle for us is jail Carr, and we'll act as quick as we can to put those before jail. So thank you very much.
Okay, thanks.
Quickly, for those of you that are new to the process, this whole deal is driven by getting our hunting rules published and out to the public before the season starts. So that's why, along with the statutory requirements for X amount of days between hearing and this and that and the other thing, why we have to sort of march down the road. Timely manner.
We have an error here. May not want this to be back.
We need to revisit Eric's motion because I have 4 in favor, 5 opposed, but that's 9, and that would include the chairman voting, and the chairman only votes to break a tie. So.
I thought he did.
That's what I thought, so I guess
Yeah, no, I only vote in the case of a tie.
That's it. And so if there was 4 in favor, there must have been 4 opposed.
So we're going to have a revote on that
Because your proposal made.
I assume that the chairman torpedoed me. That's what
Right, that's what I have, and I looked at it, and I thought, well, he only votes to break a tie, so we need to clarify that.
So that was on the deer thing, right?
Adding the one day to A and B.
Yeah.
So that's going to require you to vote. Because
We're going to have a revote, and if it's a tie, then I vote.
Okay. So we need to do that.
Okay. So we're back to the initial proposal made by Commissioner Stohl of accepting the deer rules with the exception of zones A and B to add an additional day of either sex firearm season. And if it turns out that it's defeated, then we can go back to our final vote on the proposal as is, and if not, then we go from there. Everybody kind of clear on that? Okay.
Are you asking for a motion to reconsider?
It's not even a motion to reconsider. We had a misvote.
Had a miscount.
Miscount, and I didn't count. Didn't do the counting, so.
Katie, take that ballot and whack them.
Right.
All right. So, all in favor of Commissioner Stoll's proposal, signify with a show of hands if you are in favor.
3.
So we got 3
So we dropped
now.
one.
So you are, okay. All right, so 3. All those opposed? 5 opposed.
So the miscount
Okay.
was not that it was even, the miscount was in the other direction.
Okay, okay. So what we voted on stands.
Right.
Okay, all right. All set, Matt?
Good to know. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Financial statement, Kathy Labonte. There she is. Got lost in the shuffle.
Now, I like to hide in the back of the room. Hopefully no one noticed me. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, Director Normando. As I did last month for the new members of the Commission, I'd like to introduce myself to our newest Commissioner. My name is Kathy Labonte, and I serve the department as the Chief of the Business Division. And every month I'm on the agenda just for a couple of minutes to give an update on the status of the unrestricted fish and game fund. So that status comes in the form of a financial statement, and you should have yours dated March 31st. So just to go over a little bit with you, page 1.
It'll be at the back of your package because there'll be 2 financial statements. One's in the minutes from the previous.
Thank you for that clarification, Director. I don't know what they're looking at other than, I have this.
Well, it's easy to look at the wrong one, so.
So we're looking at the one dated March 31st, 2018, which is 3/4 of the way through the fiscal year. So page 1 is always a comparison of what we have budgeted for our unrestricted revenues and our unrestricted expenditures. And the second column is our actuals through that point in time that the financial statement is dated. Page 2 is notes to the undesignated fund balance. That's if we go to fiscal committee and ask for a transfer of additional unrestricted fish and game funds to help out our budget. And page 3 is our comparison of current year budget to actual. So what the financial statement is really is we're comparing last year to this year, and we're also comparing this year to what we had budgeted. So if you look at the bottom of your page, where we have our breakout of our unrestricted revenue types, our comparison of last year to this year, we're a little behind. And I don't know about you, but I would attribute that to weather. This weather is awful. You are not out there fishing. You're not buying your fishing license. You're still shoveling snow. So hopefully we will see an increase in that for next month. Again, our receipts, our biggest receipt months are the months of May and June, which are a reflection of April and May license sales, typically from the sale of fishing licenses. But if you turn to page 4, where we're looking at our comparison of projected, which is our budgeted, to actual, we're still higher than what we've projected. We're just less than our actual of last year. Do you have any questions on the financial statement? No? Pretty easy? You should have also received your third quarter report of our commission expense to budget, dated March 31st. I do that on a quarterly basis. That was a request by the commission a couple of years ago. And if you have any questions on that, I'd be more than happy to answer them. Am I dismissed, Mr. Chairman?
I guess. Nobody has a question, so you must have answered everybody's questions in your...
I don't answer anything. I just talk quickly so that nobody has a chance to respond.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
Kathy. Okay. Standing... Oh. Okay, provide background information relative to next month's request to expend up to $10,000 from the fisheries habitat account for seasonal employees who will be performing work related to the Eastern Brook Trout joint ventures, conservation strategies, Indiana Scargan River.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the Commission. For a few of you that haven't met yet, my name is Jason Smith, and I'm currently the Chief of the Inland Fisheries Division. And I have a little bit of a good news, bad news scenario for you today. The good news is I'm not going to be asking for any additional doe days or any harvest restrictions. But the bad news is I'm going to be asking to burn all the money. So with that being said, this is on the agenda as an information item, because it's my understanding that the Commission has a policy for anything over $7,500. They generally wait to the next month's meeting in order to vote. That might be a good advantage for us, because I can provide you with any type of background information or any questions you might have between now and next month's meeting. Either myself or my staff will be more than happy to answer any of the questions you might have, so you guys can make an informed decision come next month. So with that being said, the Inland Fisheries Division has a great opportunity here to engage in a large-scale watershed project, very similar to what we've recently done in the Ammonoosuc River. This is part of the, regionally recognized Eastern Brook Trout Joint Venture, National Fish Habitat Protocol and Priorities. What we're asking for is we're asking to hire some seasonals to work with our fish and game staff. There are approximately 150 electrofishing index sites in this watershed, and fish community data is a critical first step in our widespread watershed approach proposed for this partnership. There's quite a few partners involved in this project. I won't try to read them all. They're all in the information item that you received. But just a few other items that I wanted to mention is some of our other partners have already contributed $24,000 has been granted for the moose conservation plates. We've already received $20,000 from the Phillipson Fund, and we're scheduled to receive $35,000 from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service Fish Passage Grant. So there's almost $80,000. We probably won't need the full $10,000 that I'm requesting for, but it looks like even at this point, without any additional donation, we're getting a lot of bang for a buck here. Because these fish habitat account funds are a good mechanism to leverage more funds and find more partners to leverage federal funds that otherwise wouldn't be available. So with that, I guess I would be in a position to answer any comments or questions or get back to you with answers I might not have.
Anybody have any questions for Jason?
As usual, me. One quick question, Jason. You said the Androscoggin River watershed. Does that include the McGonagle?
It does, portions of it, yep.
The lower portion?
All the way right up through some of the dead diamond work is going to tie into this all the way right down into Shelburne. So it's, like I said, there's 150 electrofishing sites that we want to get data on prior to, and you know, this information is critical to help us prioritize future habitat conservation, stream crossings. So this is a critical first step in tying this all together.
Is this going to piggyback onto the past McGalloway River?
So the telemetry work up in the dead diamond of McGalloway is still ongoing. So there's going to be some ongoing monitoring that data will end up in the same database as these additional efforts. This is kind of independent but unique because it's in the same watershed, but we're going to continue that dead diamond work independent of this regardless. So that's a great question, but it's all in the same region.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Right, thank you, Jim.
See you next month.
Okay. Standing committees. Policy Committee, Commissioner Carr.
Nothing to report.
Okay. Being that it looks like you're in need of something to do, I'm going to give you a few items. Actually, the first item was given to the Policy Committee a few months ago. However, the Policy Committee has kind of changed, completely turned over, so that was to try to come up with a date for the biennial hearings that could be used continuously. Remember the biennial hearings we had, and you know, they got to be held every 2 years. It has to be an odd numbered year, but a date is never set. So if you were to say the second Tuesday or second Wednesday or third Wednesday of December of the odd year will be the biennial hearings, and so that the date is set. Well, then also it would allow, when they publish the law books on those years, they could have the hearing date published right in it, along with a little brief thing saying what the biennial hearing is all about, which would help get people there.
We have the historical data that goes back a few years, so I can...
It's been basically lately, now correct me if I'm wrong, Director, but it's been kind of you have to have it and you get to the last day.
Yeah, you have to have it, and all of a sudden in November we tend to remember it's a biennial year, so it's a big panic, and it usually happens in December. So, you know, by setting it, the statute doesn't specify a time of year. It simply says it'll happen in the odd year of each biennium. So, I mean, later in the year is probably, you know, better, because you know, you wouldn't want it interfering with stuff like this, but but you know, it would be an opportunity to have something that's always on the calendar ahead of time so that we think about it as it approaches. Yeah.
And we're, you know, right after the fall season, kind of, you know, it's fresh in people's minds what they wanted to mention. By summer, they've already kind of forgotten what they'd like to see. So the other thing is, I believe it was the year before last, the commission had a resolution on our stance on the commission powers and duties. And since then, we have a bunch more commissioners, and it may be a good idea to bring that up for revote, being we've got a study committee coming to look at our powers and duties to reaffirm what our stance is. That sound okay?
Sounds like you'll be busy.
Okay. It really shouldn't be too awful bad.
No, it's not bad.
Next one, legislative committee, and we'll refer to Paul Sanderson.
Thank you, members of the Commissioner. For our new Commissioner, my name is Paul Sanderson. I'm the Legal and Legislative Coordinator for the Department. And I provided you a short legislative update as to all of the matters that are still pending in our legislature. To date, there's only been one new law that has actually been signed into law by the Governor. That is Senate Bill 48, the study that the Chairman just referred to, that has become Chapter 5. And I've given you a copy of that particular law as an appendix to our particular report so you can see who the members of that are likely to be. So far, nothing has been convened on that, and no members have been named as far as we can tell. With respect to legislation that's still pending, we had 3 bills that were sponsored by the Department. They remain in the legislative process headed towards approval. The first one is House Bill 1352, eliminating the non-resident freshwater bait dealer license. That was passed by the House, taken to the Senate, amended to deal with the question of the hunt of a lifetime provider. That amendment was passed by the Senate, has come back to the House, and the House Fish and Game Committee yesterday at a work session concurred with that. So that is likely to proceed to the full House with concurrence, and that will likely go forward and become law. House Bill 1411, relative to funds transferred to the non-game species account, has fully passed the House. It has been heard in Senate Finance. Senate Finance has not yet reported it to the full Senate, but the report of the hearing, which is available online, if you take a look at that in the legislative database, everyone who appeared on that was very positive in their testimony, so that is certainly looking positive. House Bill 1458, relative to exempting certain rules governing marine species from the Administrative Procedures Act. This really had to do with the cod and haddock season. We were seeking an exemption because those are federally regulated species, and we were unable to conform our rules to federal rules quickly enough by going through the full process. That has passed the House, and it is special ordered for a decision in the Senate on April 26th. And that has come from the Senate committee with a report of ought to pass, so that is also looking good. Licensing issues. There are 2 bills, House Bill 1280, which would add bow and arrow hunting licenses to those that are available to permanently disabled military veterans. That bill has passed both houses in its original form, and it awaits enrollment and moving on to the Governor for signature. House Bill 1286 is somewhat different in that this would have given benefits on the lifetime licenses to those veterans who are disabled at an 80% level. And that has been the result of some very spirited discussion at both the House and the Senate with regard to potential amendments. I can tell you that when it went over to the Senate, they liberalized it somewhat, increasing the coverage of it by expanding the definition of veteran. That was considered by the House Fish and Game Committee yesterday, and they have concerns about it from a fiscal impact point of view. And so that committee voted to non-concur and request a committee of conference. With respect to House Bill 1575, that is an important bill that adds on the ability to hunt certain species with air guns. And so that has been approved by both houses, and that will go forward to the governor for signature. I can tell you that it is limited to small game, and it's not something that would be allowed for any of our major game species for deer, bear, turkey, or moose. And this was something that was the result of negotiating in the House Fish and Game Committee that was ultimately approved by the full House and also by the full Senate. In addition to the study in Senate Bill 48 that we've talked about, there is likely to be another study coming out of the House Resource, Recreation, and Development Committee as a result of Senate Bill 410. That is for what is called a boat safeguard, which would be similar in concept to our hike safeguard. The idea being trying to get voluntary contributions from those involved in non-motorized water sports. And so that study, we don't know the report from Resources and Recreation yet, but if that study were to go forward, that's the intent of it. From a law enforcement perspective, there are two very important bills which remain unresolved: House Bill 1313 and Senate Bill 500. House Bill 1313, in its present form, would remove from our OHRV law and our snowmobile law the current prohibitions against carrying loaded firearms on those particular types of vehicles. That has passed the House, and it has moved on to the Senate, into Senate Judiciary. Senate Bill 500 is a much more comprehensive review of firearms terminology that was reviewed very, very carefully by the House Fish and Game Committee. In there are provisions that would, that would define what in fact is a loaded weapon for the first time in our statutes. It would provide an exemption to those with agricultural interests to be able to carry a loaded firearm while working in their fields. Some other important aspects like that. The two bills are very closely related because what that would allow is a farmer with an OHRV, for example, if he were in his particular field, to have a loaded firearm, which the current OHRV statute would prohibit. And so,
a loaded long gun.
Loaded long gun. I do want to be careful when I talk about that. We're talking about loaded long guns, and we're not talking about pistols and revolvers. Last year, at Senate Bill 12, which passed into law, changed a portion of RSA 159 such that loaded pistols and revolvers can be carried on the person by anyone at any time in any place. And we recognize that to be the law. So we're talking in House Bill 1313 and in Senate Bill 500 about loaded long guns. And that's a very important distinction. And so those bills remain under consideration in the Senate Judiciary Committee. And then finally, Senate Bill 451 relative to wildlife trafficking. And you will remember that that had some very spirited discussions here in the commission. I can tell you that it was amended when it came out of the Senate, has now gone to the House Fish and Game Committee, where another amendment was put onto it yesterday as a result of their work session. And I've given you a copy of the bill as it came out of the Senate and also the amendment that was considered yesterday. I will tell you that when it came out of House Fish and Game yesterday, it was not a unanimous vote, and so therefore it is likely to be considered on the floor of the House before we have their decision. Those are the major pieces of legislation that still remain pending. Be happy to answer any questions that you have. If not, thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul. All right. Rivers Committee, Commissioner Ryan cannot make it today, so. Lakes Committee was Commissioner Clews, and from what my secretary has just informed me of, we can, being that he is no longer on the commission, we can appoint, or are we nominating?
We're nominating, and then a letter gets sent to the governor,
Okay.
and he confirms it.
Okay, we can nominate somebody new for the Lakes Committee. Is there any commissioners here that would like to be our designee to the Lakes Committee? Should I just randomly pick somebody? Being a nice Democratic fellow that I am, I will give it a month to see if someone figures it piques their interest before we use extreme powers. So right now we'll currently leave that open for 1 month, and then we're going to put in a name. Handbook and Orientation Committee, Commissioner Patch.
Yes, we had a work session last week. Basically finished identifying the things that need to be changed and updated. And we're waiting on a little bit more information and the folders. So next month we'll hand out a new handbook that's all the same to everybody.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Strategic Planning Committee, Commissioner Hodgdon.
We were not able to meet.
Okay. Have you got any meetings planned?
I will have one shortly.
Work?
We're trying to work out travel schedules and availability.
All right. Wildlife Heritage Foundation, Commissioner Hodgdon.
Thank you. So the foundation met on the 21st of March and completed a lot of work on the grant funds, and I'll have more to report on that activity next month. But for this month's meeting, I wanted to highlight their sponsorship and participation in this weekend's Discover Wild Hampshire Day. It's the 10th year that they are participating, and it's a large fundraiser for the foundation. And this year, they have raffle items from the Kentucky Canoe and Kayak Company, as well as guided fishing trips from Tim Moore and Hope Eagleston. So great opportunity for the foundation to raise a few dollars to support their activities. And they also had their, what I believe is their first Friends of New Hampshire Heritage luncheon, and the department's Andy Timmons made a presentation, and Angus Bozeman, who's a local guide, also participated in that luncheon. So a lot of good work being completed by the foundation.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Hodgdon. Awards Committee obviously met because we gave out the commission awards today. I would like to thank Commissioners Baldwin, Carr, and Millett for all of their hard work and dedication on picking out the correct recipients of the awards. Thank you. The Policy Committee, I'd like to add Commissioner, oh, I already have Commissioner Temple on there. Okay. I thought I put him on.
You did.
I'm allowing, yeah, I've got him on there. Allowing Commissioner McGinnis a month to kind of figure out where he wants to be.
Other than here?
Yeah, no, I'm trying to, ultimately, I'd like to see everybody on either policy or legislative, because those are the two biggest committees, and not always everyone can show. So it kind of leaves a little bit of gap, so that somebody's on two committees and they attend, it doesn't leave those short. So, okay, so now we'll go to old business. Any old business? As I promised earlier, I'd come back to that 410 deal on new business.
is new business. You know, if a month ago somebody had mentioned to me this idea of using the 410 to take turkeys, I would have thought that was basically a joke. Since then, all of a sudden they came up with this I don't know if it's TTS or TSS shot, where number 9 pellets actually have more energy than number 6s in lead. So you can, a 410 all of a sudden is equal to, you know, at least a 20 gauge was before, if not a 12 gauge with like a regular 2 3/4 ounce load of number 6s. But the catch is, as Glenn had pointed out, there's only one company making these shells. And from what I read, currently right now, they're $15 a piece. So I cannot imagine, you know, that a whole lot of people are going to be running out and buying them. So I can't see there'd be a big demand right off the bat for people wanting to use them. But I'm open to looking at it if you people are. Commissioner Patch.
One issue of the 410 is you have 2.5 inch and 3 inch shells. A 2.5 inch shell has 11/16 ounces of shot. A 3 inch shell has 3/4 of an inch, 3/4 of an ounce of shot. So, and to get 3/4 of an ounce, which is like 28 gauge, it's in a longer, narrow string. The shot itself is out. So they may be very powerful, but you don't have very many of them. A 20 gauge, on the other hand, a standard target load is 7/8 of an ounce. And if you have a 20 gauge 3 inch, you have 1.25 ounces. So there's a huge difference in the amount of shot in the pattern. When you pattern a shotgun, you take a 30-inch circle, you shoot it 25 yards, you count the number of shot in the circle and how dense it is. Whether it's a hole here or whatnot. That's the only way to truly effectively look at it. So even though those super shells may have a lot more power per bird shot, there's nowhere near as many of them, so you're not going to have a very dense pattern.
Well, that's what I thought at first, until I found out that number 9s would be what you would use.
Mm-hmm.
So well, number 9s
there's more number 9s than there are number 6s.
Right, and that's exactly what they point out. And it almost makes it equivalent. But it's something that should be a discussion, you know, with everyone, but I don't know if it's being the cost and the limitation of the availability, if it's something we need to jump into.
Yeah, and I agree, it's one company.
Yeah.
So I'd recommend that.
Did you have something?
No.
Oh, okay.
I guess Barry does.
Barry, go ahead.
Well, one, it seems like an opportunity for ammo manufacturers to get off their butt and come up with something so there's more than one company. That aside, I don't think we have enough true ballistic information that I can read and touch it. We're talking bananas right now. I like to see something that we can look at and whatnot. And additionally, with this proposal, I would suggest that we keep this for youth only, so that just the kids, which would eliminate them having a 32-inch response bird. No one in the right mind would give that to a kid, but
I guess the question would be, should we encourage the Wildlife Division to kind of look into this further or not?
not at this time until I think we should, you know, you and David, you guys know everything there is about bullets. So I'd like to see a spec sheet that we can look at and kind of get a better handle on the power of this particular shell. I agree with you. Very few people spend $15 a shell.
I'd say they ought to supply you with a box to check out.
That's a good thing, and I think the chairman ought to request that box. So I think it's something that we need to look at, but I think we're kind of jumping ahead of ourselves. Let's get some solid information of what this thing actually is. Ask them, I'm serious, ask them for a couple of rounds. I'd like to see what one looks like.
Yeah, well, if the shell's going to look the same, it's the shot inside of it that's some strange metal that's basically almost as dense as gold.
Okay. It ought to be damn heavy when you lift that
right.
shell.
And that being said, I like to see something written down in ballistic data and what it's.
Okay.
Why is this company putting this out? Is it for turkey hunting? Is it for something else? Well, they're going to have to convince me that that's a pretty viable solution. So they need to do something about that.
And if I can, May, the thing is that when they're talking about using it for kids, of course the gun is lighter, typically a 410, but recoil's a function of the amount of powder, and by amount I mean the weight of powder, the weight of the gun, the weight of the projectile. So if that projectile
and velocity,
so if that projectile and the velocity of it is similar, even though it may be out of a smaller barrel, if it's similar to what a 20 gauge or whatever is out of a lighter shotgun, the idea that these are nice because kids can use them, actual recoil-wise, may not stand the test of time. But
I don't disagree, but I don't think that's for us to determine whose kids can use what.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. But I mean, that's kind of their point that they're saying is because it's a 410, it's easier for kids.
Okay. Anybody else got anything on that? All right, we will move on to commissioners' reports. Have any of the commissioners done anything out of the normal? Or
I attended the advisory committee on wind fisheries meeting last month's meeting, as well as two of Doug Road's public hearings, one on Menhaden and the other on Shrub.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else do anything exemplary? Commissioner Baldwin?
I attended a public hearing that Paul ran very well. FIS 1500 would be fair to say regarding the fee for joining for the benefit of a discount for the snowmobile clubs, signing up with New Hampshire Snowmobile Association for the privilege of getting a $30 discount, paying $12. And it was a good discussion. Not many attended, but the word was out. I attended it. It was very interesting.
Thank you, Commissioner Baldwin. Commissioner Pat?
We held the Carroll County Friends of NRA dinner March 30th, and we raised $12,300 in profit. And it goes to the shooting ranges in New Hampshire. Any shooting range in New Hampshire can apply for a grant and receive firearms, ammunition, gear defenders, particularly for children's programs, teaching them firearms safety and how to use a gun.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, under, I'm going to try and put this on the commissioner report. Last year, the commission worked up to Berry Camp a couple days. Commissioner Carr was there. Commissioner Carr and myself, the only two left. Working on the covered archery firing point. Now, they still need the shooting platform. And I would like to try to see if the commission would like to get together on a weekend
and go up and finish this platform. Now, what we did last year, we basically got up there Saturday morning, worked all day Saturday, had supper on Saturday night, stayed there in a cabin, got breakfast in the morning up there, and then worked all day Sunday and went home. Camp starts end of June, so we'd have to pick a weekend sometime in May or beginning part of June. I'd like everybody kind of think it over and send me an email saying what weekend would work for you, and I also need to speak with Mark Beauchesne to coordinate through him, and we'll see if we can get this thing finished before the camp opens. Director's report.
Right. So, got a bit of a list here. First thing for Mr. Chairman would be that, amongst other things, that SBA 48 commission, whenever that does get going, and there's a timeline on it. I forget what it is. It's 75 days.
Yes.
Before it has to have a first meeting, which started me to thinking why maybe you didn't sign it for a while because they didn't want to start it too soon. But you'll need to make a decision who's it's going to be you or you're going to designate somebody to.
As of right now, it's going to be you.
So a few updates on things you may or you may not hear about. First of all, bears in Hanover have been a popular topic on the news lately. So we have that same sow that was there last year with 3 yearling bears that we relocated is now back in Hanover with 4 shiny new cubs. We collared her Friday so that we can find her anytime. She shouldn't move quite as much as she did before because these cubs are basically stuck in one spot, and we're hoping to get her moved. However, at the moment, moving her is the same as shooting her because there's conditions up north. There's no place to bring her to where there's still 50 inches of snow in Pittsburgh type of thing. So, we're basically hoping she doesn't get in trouble in the meantime, and we'll hope for the best on that one. Because of course there's much public interest. There was a decision made by upon appeal about Sunapee that the Sullivan County sportsmen did not have standing to appeal the Sunapee permit decision. So basically, unless anybody wants to take that to the Supreme Court, the appeal line, if you will, is pretty much all done on Wild Goose. Disposition of the property is still essentially up in the air. I don't know. I know where we're maybe trying to go with it, but I don't know what pressure's being brought to bear to do something else with it. I have not heard other than that the Sunapee committee, the majority made a recommendation to turn it over to Department of Natural and Cultural Resources. So that's whether that can happen by a vote of CORD, Council on Resources and Development. But I have not heard of it being put on an agenda at CORD yet, of which we're a member and have a You may also hear some nonsense about how there's actually property for sale that we have not, have been unwilling to look at. In fact, there is a homeowner who tried to sell us a piece of property in George's Mills some years ago and said piece is still for sale. I went up there at the time with Kevin Gagney, who's the engineer that designed Wild Goose, who worked for FST at the time we were under contract with. We looked the site over. It is not attached to the George's Mills boat ramp. You may recall there was a period back in the late 90s when we had a purchase and sale for a piece of property across from George's Mills boat ramp, which is owned by the town of Sunapee. And the town of Sunapee was talking about transferring the boat ramp to us, and the property was going to be used for the parking. That fell through when the town meeting voted not to do the transfer. That property was eventually sold and turned into an elderly housing complex. This piece of property is further away from the Sunapee site. It is smaller, from the George's Mills ramps. It is smaller than that parking lot area that we had looked at back in the day. And the only thing we could use it for would be parking. It would require the demolition of the house. It is a piece that's right on the main drag there on Route 11. Because of a very tall, steep slope, there's no way to have a road running to the George's Mills boat ramp from the property. You would have to come out on a very busy road, the same excuse used at the Goose, and then do a loop around to go launch your boat, then drive back, and then walk back. And additionally, in spite of all of this talk, there's been no conversation. The town of Sunapee is any interested in actually giving us the George's Mills ramp site. So this is all about a small potential parking area. It has been presented to show that somehow Fish and Game has been unwilling to engage in looking at other places. But I can tell you, like I said, Kevin and I spent a whole good part of a day there looking at it way back when, 4 or 5 years ago, to see if it really had any potential value for the purpose, because of course at the time we were right in the middle of the whole permitting thing and with no idea really where it would come out in the end, so we were looking at serious options. Let's see, moving on to another one of my current favorite topics is something called Emery Farm that I want you to all be aware of. So we have been the proud owners of something called, it's actually technically called Sunset Farm. It is part of the Great Bay Estuarine Research Reserve. It's a 26-acre property with a farmhouse, some chicken coops that got turned into apartments, and a few other buildings. On or around 2001, the department paid around $1,066,000 for this piece of property. It is surrounded by cornfields and other good things. Has a ramp going down to Great Bay that in the day was used heavily by ice fishermen to get out on the bay. It also, when it was transferred to us, had a life tenancy or a life estate for a Priscilla Emery who lived on the property. She passed away a couple of months ago. The property is now ours. Unfortunately, so are her brother and a bunch of tenants that we're dealing with. that are leftovers from this life estate, and while they have no claims to the property, there are a lot of issues associated with moving them on, and I've enjoyed considerable time dealing with them so far, as has Paul, not so much in his capacity working for Fish and Game, but as his capacity as the chairman of the Board of Selectmen in Greenland, which town it's in, and it's liable to continue to be an issue for some time, I think. You know, of course, the Attorney General's office is heavily involved in this thing, and you know, it never looks good when you got people that need to be moved on. But I mean, the other part of this is this was over $1 million in federal money spent for this, and there are certain requirements to that grant, and one of them is not that it become residential rental property. So unless the state, of course, wants to pay it back to NOAA. So you know, I'm hoping we can really get all these things resolved over the next couple of months without it turning into some giant explosion in the newspapers and all, but life being what it is these days, I'm not necessarily optimistic. So I just want you aware that when you see that, that's what that's all about. Saturday's Wild New Hampshire Day. If any of you haven't been to that, I highly encourage you to come and check the situation out, because it can often be surprising just what a madhouse it can be around here when there's 6,000 or 8,000 people around. We will have a Black Hawk helicopter land just at the entryway that always starts sucking people in. Looks like a vortex of bees heading over there when that happens.
Free rides, right?
No, yeah, $6,500 an hour, free rides. I not confirmed this yet, but I'm thinking about having our June meeting, not next month, but the month after, up at Owlbrook. A couple of you have been around when we did sort of a Finance 101 thing, where I went down through sort of the budget and how the numbers work for the department, and given with all the new folks we've got, it's probably time to do that again. And also we like to get around the state a little bit, so we maybe try shooting for June and throw a couple of dogs on the grill while we're there for lunch. Finally, on sort of a personal note, I'm currently the Vice President of the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies. I will probably be President in September, which, you know, not that it's that big of a deal, but I'll be the association's well over 100 years old. It was founded, I think, in 1901. I'll be the first New Hampshire director to ever be the president. There's a different one every year, so it took us a while to get around to it, I guess. But anyway, that'll involve a little bit more travel than I have done in the past, because there's you know, a little more time in Washington trying to deal with issues that involve all the states. And you know, we'll see how that goes. I have to go to Washington next week for 2 days, Wednesday and Thursday, but hopefully that'll be the end of the spring travel round for a little bit. And that is my report.
Okay, thank you. Call to the public.
Question about lead. What about the toxicity of that 410 shot? Does that mean a non-lead shot?
That's a good question. I don't know. I'm sure it's non-lead, but whether it's non-toxic, I would have no idea. What's it made out of?
Some metal off of Mars or something. I mean, it's a tungsten.
It's a tungsten, but
so it is non-toxic.
We'll send a pound over to your house and you can chow down and see what it does to you. That'd be right.
What? How much more ways than lead?
Yeah, well, I'm just looking at, is that a Fort, that's not a 410
No,
shell.
that's a 12-gauge shell.
Yeah, I was going to say.
It's the size of the pellet anyway.
Is that
It'd be the pellet.
Who did the ballistic work?
This is,
I believe Sammy did.
yeah, it's
Sammy.
federal.
Okay.
It's a federal product.
You know, yes, I worked in Parker River when that gunshot came, and I remember that everybody talking 410 20 gauge. A 20 gauge 3 inch is the same shot capacity as a 12 gauge 2 3/4. So everybody started buying 20 gauge, and it really got into a hell of a mess. They were arresting people, right, coming to the gate. It was amazing what happened with some new shot hit. And then finally they bought bismuth in from England, and we said that'll take care of it. Right? It was something like $45 a box. Everybody had 3 or 4 boxes. So don't think that's going to deter too many people, because I remember checking these guys that I couldn't believe. They'd go duck hunting and have $100 worth of shot, 4 boxes. And you were buying it for $3 a box, they were paying $25. $1 around then, so that was back, what, in the early 60s, or late 50s, early 60s, I guess. It was a mess, so I get a boot out of this, I said, this is going to start all over again.
Okay. Julia?
Regarding, I just have a question and a comment regarding today's, something happened today, and it's related to actually Christina's question last month. When she asked you about, she indicated that she sent some research, and you had said, well, you know, I clicked into it, and I saw a bunch of studies, and, you know, that's all I saw. Which made me think maybe the commission doesn't really respect or understand studies. And then at today's meeting, Mark mentioned the fact that his numbers were based on studies, and it kind of got the same feeling, at least from 3 or 4 of you, like the studies don't matter. So I'm wondering, like, when somebody sends you research, or there's research done, and there's studies done, what exactly is it that you're looking for? Because you indicated it just led to a bunch of studies.
That was on the coyote, supposedly coyote research study done in New York. Well, the actual research was not done in New York. The study was a study of various other studies done around the country. Okay, it was not a definite start to finish research, where they did the research and compiled the data and gave us a means and margin of error.
So is it the compilation of it that you didn't get that you were looking for?
We'll put it this way, I mean, do you think that all studies are necessarily accurate?
Well, I certainly think Mark's are.
Okay, but I mean, do you think all of them are?
No, but I'm just saying that in general, the commission, it feels like you're not that interested in studies if they don't promote the recreational activities that you want them to promote. That's what it feels like.
Okay, well, thank you for your comment. Christina?
Thank you. Christina Snyder. I have just a couple things I want to mention real quick is the Discover Wild New Hampshire Day that's coming up this Saturday. I'm actually the spokesperson for this year for it. We're actually hosting a demonstration of protest, which we have done, coordinated with me and New Hampshire Animal Rights League, which we have done the past 4 or 5 years. And when this year I applied for the permit to do that, there was tremendous feedback, and there was some confusion with the permits. And then it got to the point where I was actually told by the administrative services that Fish and Game says no, we cannot be there.
So, and that was by Mark Buchain. And then so what I was, from that I was, took the feeling that I was supposed to say, oh, okay, and they wanted us to go, you know, all the way down to Loudon Road and Hazen Drive. And there was discussion back, there's been many emails. I've been jumping through hoops now for about a month. I did plenty of time to do the permits. I had to call the ACLU and get the executive director involved because my rights were being threatened, and he agreed. So what happened was there was a whole correspondence back and forth with Fish and Game and the Department of Justice for my constitutional right to hold a peaceful assembly where we have been the past 4 or 5 years without incident. We do not impede pedestrian, we do not impede vehicular, we are very peaceful, and we are there just exercising our right. And I'll tell you, you see all these flags waving around, don't tread on me. Well, I feel like I was tread on. And I'm very upset about that. But I'll tell you, it worked out because I got the ACLU involved and because of the actions of the lawyer that was representing me. And we do have a spot, and we will be there Saturday. And I want to tell you, it's very disconcerting when a branch and a department of the government of the state of New Hampshire tells a citizen, we do not want you there because you don't like my message. Well, that's too bad. And I want to also say that I'm a donator to this department. I'm a steward level donator to the Non-Game Endangered Wildlife Fund, which is $125 a year. I go to conservation meetings hosted by Fish and Game. And I just want to say this is just dancing on some very dangerous territory. We acquiesced and we said, okay, we will take this cordoned off spot where we will be. That was finally approved after many back and forths. I want to say to each and every one of you that this is a very important issue. This isn't your side, his side, her side, my side. This is, you know, a right to peaceful assembly, which I want to reiterate, we have done the past 5 years without incident, very peacefully. Colonel Jordan came up, he looks at the permits, and I say, are we okay? Are we within our rights? And trust me, everybody that will be there will answer to me if they create any problems or give any kind of trouble, because that's not what we're there for. So I just want to say, I'm just very disappointed in the state of New Hampshire, the New Hampshire Department of Fish and Game, that I had to go through all these hoops and I had to involve the ACLU for our right to protest. So that's all I want to say.
Do you want to comment on that, Paul?
No, except to just indicate that that was in fact handled by the Department of Justice for us.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Baldwin.
Mr. Chairman, I in my extended life have never objected to other people's opinion, and I will continue my life doing so. I highly respect other people's opinion, and I request my opinion in kind. I have a short comment to offer. I read all the pros and cons of the rules and proposals that have been submitted to our department and the commissioners, which some of them came in personally, regarding the administrating of the rules proposed by Fish and Game Department. I wrote this down so I wouldn't get emotional about it, and so I want to say this to this public hearing. There are considerable comments that are made by those that are against the current rules regarding management of wildlife. And yet many of those comments are suggested by people who are involved in managing animals other than wildlife. I mention this because managing non-wildlife involves breeding parameters, leash laws, control enclosures, rabies and distemper shots, planned parenting, neutering, castrating, euthanasia. All of this is done under the Humane Society or some of the other, and a cat, and I love cats, I have cats. Probably the biggest predator against birds around. So basically what I'm saying, I don't want to get into a shooting contest, but I'm saying this, that the New Hampshire Fish and Game Wildlife Management has proven that their rules of management over years, based on scientific and biological studies, have shown that they know what they are doing And although they do not use the same controls suggested by those in the non-wildlife management, and obviously they can't use the same controls, I suggest we not tell them how to manage their non-wildlife critters, and they respect the professionals that manage wildlife critters. That's my comment.
Anybody else have a?
No. I'll see if I can change the mood here.
Okay.
I would like to thank Chief Fisheries Jason Smith for his presentation today. It's very important for groups like Trout Unlimited. I'm the Vice President of Conservation for Trout Unlimited, Saco Valley, and the Androscoggin comes under our umbrella. But it's very important that we get the missing data filled in for the Eastern Brook Trout Joint Venture so that we can write grants to get the habitat restored and get, you know, our state fish, the Eastern Brook Trout, protected. Because it's really starting to fall under some tough times on the Androscoggin watershed with the encroachment of the rainbow trout. And we hope that the commission will approve that funding request at next month's meeting.
Thank you for your comment. All set? Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Made by Commissioner Carr, seconded by Commissioner